For the past 2,000 years, a sacred text called the Zohar has been sealed away and strictly forbidden. In the darkest eras of history, simply opening the pages of this book could have been enough to turn you into a criminal sentenced to death. Why? The elites and ancient religious empires did everything they could to keep the Zohar hidden in order to protect their own exclusive right to rule. This book made lawmakers truly tremble because it explained the nature of the universe with terrifying clarity and precision. Because thousands of years ago, the Zohar described the universe as consisting of 10 dimensions, perfectly matching string theory in modern quantum physics. This text affirms that everything around us is made entirely of light and vibrational frequencies. In addition, the Zohar gives detailed guidance on how the human mind directly creates physical reality through a system known as the Tree of Light. The book also describes the true form of the angels, confirming that they are forces carrying enormous destructive power toward our planet. Especially when angels live among human beings, the consequences can sometimes be truly terrifying. At the same time, this text exposes the true purpose of the public Bible. The ruling class used familiar historical events as an outer shell to conceal the method for awakening the great power inside each individual. Because its contents revealed so many shocking truths, ancient Jewish law placed extremely strict limits on who could access the book. A reader had to be over 40 years old, married and deeply knowledgeable in the Torah before being permitted to study the Zohar or Kabbalah, unless they wanted to go insane, become blind, or lose their life. It should be noted that this video takes a completely neutral position. We focus on collecting and accurately presenting content from ancient texts. The main purpose is to provide information so our community can discuss it together. Prepare yourself to face the most primordial knowledge. Today we will bring all of these truths out into the light. Welcome to the Zohar, where shocking secrets about the Creator, about the angels, and about your own self have been sealed away for 2 millennia. The hidden history. Imagine stepping into an ancient library in Spain, surrounded by dark wooden shelves, the smell of old leather, and the dust of time filling the silent air. On a stone table beneath the dim glow of an oil lamp, there lies a manuscript written in ancient Aramaic. The lines inside speak of the Torah Genesis, the human soul, the first light of the universe, and the hidden layers of operation behind the world that ordinary eyes can see. You open the first page with the feeling that you are reading a commentary on the Hebrew Bible. But after only a few passages, the book begins to take you further. It explains that the familiar stories in Scripture contain a much more refined system. Words carry weight, actions leave traces, greed creates fractures in the soul, and righteousness can draw human beings closer to the sacred order of God. That book is the Zohar. In Hebrew, Zohar means radiance. For those who walk in the tradition of Kabbalah, this is one of the most important mystical texts in Judaism. It explains the Torah as a living text, where every story has an outer body and an inner soul. Adam, Cain, Noah, Abraham, Moses, the Garden of Eden, the Great Flood. The light of the first day, all of these become signs of how God placed order upon the universe and placed responsibility upon the human soul. That very thing caused the Zohar to become a book surrounded by caution. Throughout history, ruling powers have always understood the strength of fear. A person who fears punishment will bow more quickly. A community afraid of being excluded will remain silent longer. A nation cut off from its sacred memory will more easily accept chains that are given more beautiful names. Order, safety, stability, obedience. But the Zohar touches directly upon that core point. It teaches that this world has an order deeper than political power. It reminds the reader that the human soul comes from a sacred source, that moral life leaves real consequences, and that greed, lies, and cruelty all carry weight before God. A person who understands this will walk differently. They may still live inside an empire passed through taxes, laws, wars, and poverty. But within their heart, they know there is a court higher than the throne of Caesar and higher than every human throne. That is why mystical texts have always been taught with great care. The ancients believed that sacred knowledge is like fire in a forge. It can light a room, melt metal, and shape both a plowshare and a sword. But when it falls into the hands of the arrogant, that same fire can burn down the whole house. For that reason, Kabbalah was never taught broadly to anyone who was simply curious. According to Jewish tradition, the student usually had to have a strong foundation in the Torah life experience, the ability to pray, and the ability to control himself. The idea was very simple before trying to understand deep matters about the soul or the universe. A person first needs to learn how to live uprightly, humbly and responsibly in the very practical things of daily life. For this reason, the Zohar has often been viewed as a book that must be approached with great caution, not because it contains secrets capable of overthrowing empires, but because it forces the reader to think differently about himself and about the world. When reading the Zohar, people do not look at the stories in Scripture merely as historical events or simple moral lessons. They also search for deeper meaning behind them. That can lead many people to ask questions they had never thought of before. However, mystical texts can also be easily misunderstood. A person without a foundation or someone too confident in his own interpretation may read a few complex ideas and quickly conclude that he has grasped special truths above everyone else. For this reason, in Jewish tradition, the Zohar is usually studied with guidance, experience, and an attitude of humility, rather than being approached only through passing curiosity. And to understand why this book is surrounded by such a heavy atmosphere, we must turn back in time to the 2nd century after Christ, when the land of Israel was suffocating beneath the enormous shadow of Rome. 13 years in the dark cave and the design of the universe. The 2nd century after Christ. At that time, the land of Israel lay beneath the iron hand of an empire accustomed to ruling through legions, taxes, and public sentences. After the bloody Jewish revolts, Rome entered Judea with the coldness of a victor. Stone roads were laid straight across conquered lands. Fortresses rose upon high points. Legionaries patrolled dusty markets where people lowered their heads as they passed through tax stations. The sound of iron sandals striking the road became the familiar sound of a people under watch. The Jews who kept the Torah still gathered in small rooms and courtyards in the shadows of places that attracted little attention. They reread the words of the patriarchs. They reminded one another of the covenant of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, and of the God who brought his people out of Egypt with a mighty arm. But every teaching in that period could bring disaster. Rome regarded the sacred memory of the Jewish people as a hidden fire. When a people still remembers that it belongs to God, it becomes very difficult for them to become obedient property of the empire. In the midst of that tense age, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai appeared. He was a disciple of Rabbi Akiva, the great teacher who had suffered martyrdom after the Roman persecution. Akiva's death became a deep mark carved into the memory of an entire generation. The Romans could call it a sentence. But to those who loved the Torah It was the blood-stained sign of a master who placed the Word of God above his own life. Shimon understood the face of Rome very clearly. When the Romans boasted of wide paved roads, luxurious public bathhouses, crowded markets, and magnificent constructions, he looked through that splendor. Roads helped armies move faster. Markets helped taxes flow more steadily. Bathhouses and arenas made the people forget their chains for a few brief moments. Behind the white stone marble columns and roaring praise was a machine of rule-grinding conquered peoples in order to feed the glory of Rome. Shimon did not keep those thoughts to himself. He openly said that behind Rome's magnificence was a system built to serve the power of the empire more than the benefit of the peoples it ruled. And in an empire that placed power above all things, anyone who publicly pointed out its hidden face could be regarded as a threat. For that reason, a truthful word could sometimes be treated like an act of rebellion. The news reached the ears of the authorities. The sentence was handed down. Shimon bar Yochai and his son Rabbi Eleazar left public life and fled into the wilderness. They found a deep cave where the light outside entered only as a thin streak across the dry ground. From that moment, the world of father and son was reduced to stone walls, cold sand, the smell of damp earth, the sound of dripping water, and the heavy breathing of men being hunted. Outside the cave was Rome, with its army arrest orders and the power of steel. Inside the cave were two men holding onto the Torah with every breath. Tradition says that God provided for them even in that barren place. A carob tree grew near the cave entrance, its roots gripping the hard rock. A small spring seeped from the ground, enough to keep them alive from day to day. Father and son lived on bitter carob fruit and cold spring water. To keep their only garments from rotting, they dug pits in the sand and buried their bodies up to the neck, letting their skin touch the earth, putting their clothes back on only when they prayed. 13 years passed in the dark cave, 13 seasons of burning sun over the desert, 13 seasons of cold nights cutting through the flesh, 13 years of life with very little food, very few comforts, and almost nothing left to think about except studying the Torah, praying, and meditating on God. That cave was like a tomb for men who were still breathing. Yet precisely there, Shimon was stripped of everything that had once distracted the human mind. The noise of the market, the noise of debate, the noise of money, praise, status, reputation, safety, even the feeling of still belonging to an ordinary community. When the outside world was cut away, every letter of the Torah became the only source of life. Shimon read Genesis in that darkness. He read of the day when God said, "Let there be light." That sentence carried a different weight inside the cave. The light in Genesis was not only the first dawn of the world. It was the act by which God placed order upon chaos, drew a boundary. For darkness began time and gave every created thing a place in his work. For Shimon, that light became the first design of the universe, a place where all things exist under the power, limits, and purpose of the Creator. He continued reading about Adam. The first man was shaped from the dust of the ground, then received the breath of life from God. In that image, Shimon saw the entire tragedy of humanity. The human body is drawn up from the lowly earth, always knowing hunger, pain, fear, and the desire for passing things. Yet inside that body is a sacred breath, a deep inner part that always longs to return to the source that gave it life. That very tension creates the tragedy and the beauty of human life. Human beings carry within themselves two realities existing together. The body belongs to the material world with real needs, fears, and desires. But deeper than that, the soul still turns toward the sacred origin that gave it life. Therefore, every choice becomes a decision to chase what brings immediate benefit or to live according to more enduring values such as justice, mercy, truth, and the fear of God. Then Shimon read about Cain and Abel. He paused for a long time over the story. Because when examined carefully, it is not only the story of one brother killing another. For Shimon, it was the first time the Torah showed where violence truly begins. It begins with hidden movements inside the human heart, with the silent jealousy in Cain's heart, with the feeling of being overlooked, with bitterness accumulating day after day, with anger smoldering and growing over time. One thing after another gathered inside him, until one day it became an action. And when Abel's blood soaked into the ground, Shimon saw a terrifying truth. Sin can grow until it turns brothers into enemies. That is also the way the Zohar would later read the stories in the Torah. It does not only look at the event happening outside, but also at the hidden movements inside the human soul. The Zohar does not treat the Torah only as history or law. According to it, every story has a deeper layer of meaning concerning the soul, the way God governs the world, and the place of human beings within that plan. What the eyes see is only the surface. Behind it is a wider sacred reality. It was in the darkness of the cave that the spiritual foundation of the Zohar became linked in Kabbalistic tradition with Shimon bar Yochai. Through the experience of being hunted isolated and living at the edge of death, he looked at the Torah with eyes that had shed many illusions of ordinary life. Rome could raise stone columns, open roads, collect taxes, and stamp the names of emperors onto coins. But in the dark cave, Shimon saw an order greater than Rome, greater than every empire, greater even than the fear of death. That is what makes this story reach beyond an ancient legend about the past. A person may enter his own cave through illness, failure, old age, or loss. Such moments strip away many familiar coverings and force a person to face questions that cannot be avoided. How have I lived? How have I treated others? And what truly remains? When power, money, or reputation can no longer help. That is also where the Zohar points. It does not discuss mystical ideas merely to satisfy curiosity. On the contrary, it brings every question about the soul and God back into everyday life. A lie told for profit, an unjust decision in a family, an act of abusing power, or something that causes the conscience to ache many years later, all carry moral and spiritual meaning. From the viewpoint of the Zohar, no choice fully disappears. Every action leaves a mark inside a person and helps shape that person's relationship with God. For this reason, Shimon's cave is not only a place in legend. It is the image of the moment when a person is separated from noise in order to face the truth. In that place, the Torah becomes a mirror looking straight into the soul. And from that place, tradition says, the hidden mystical layers of the Zohar began to be revealed. But the history of this book still contains a large gap. If the Zohar truly originated with Shimon bar Yochai in the 2nd century, why did it appear publicly only more than 1,000 years later, in Spain in the hands of a scholar named Moses de Leon? That question opened a debate that has lasted for many centuries. Moses de Leon and the debate over the sacred channel of transmission. In the 13th century, Spain was a land of great collisions. Jewish communities lived amid the worlds of Christianity, Islam, Greek philosophy, Arab medicine, mathematics, astronomy, and fierce theological debates. In the Jewish quarters of Castile, scholars sat beside oil lamps, reading the Torah, the Talmud, and ancient commentaries, then debating the soul angel's creation free will and the way God governs history. It was fertile ground for Kabbalah to develop. In that setting, Moses de Leon began circulating an extraordinary text. He introduced it as the Zohar, a work recording the mystical teachings of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai and his disciples. The text was written in Aramaic, carrying an ancient tone, and presented itself as sacred conversations along journeys through Galilee. Shimon and his students stop before mountains, cemeteries, rivers, and fields, then open each verse of the Torah into layers of meaning that ordinary readers can hardly reach. Those manuscripts quickly caused a shock. Those who loved Kabbalah regarded it as a treasure returned from antiquity. They believed Moses de Leon had brought to light a legacy preserved across many generations. To them, the Zohar carried the voice of the cave of Shimon, of an age when the Torah was studied amid persecution and martyrdom. But not everyone immediately believed that story. Some scholars and rabbis began to doubt the origin of this text, and they asked difficult questions. This text appeared very late. Many earlier scholars were almost silent about such a major work. The language and ideas in the Zohar carry many traces of the Spanish Kabbalistic environment of the 13th century. After Moses de Leon died, a famous account claimed that his widow said her husband had written the work himself, then attributed it to Shimon bar Yochai in order to increase its authority. From there, a debate lasting hundreds of years began. Was Moses de Leon the one who discovered an ancient text? Was he the true author? Or was he the one who gathered a stream of esoteric tradition that had existed in scattered form across many generations, then gave it a complete shape? That question still gives the history of the Zohar its tension. Skeptics look at Moses de Leon's economic circumstances. The account concerning his widow and the medieval traces in the text then conclude that he wrote most of the work himself. Modern scholars often follow this direction while also acknowledging that the Zohar may have used older mystical materials. That view helps explain why the text both carries an ancient voice and reflects the concerns of the Jewish community in Spain at that time. But for the masters of Kabbalah, the story has another depth. They view the Zohar as a living transmission. Sacred knowledge in this understanding can move through time like an underground stream. It flows beneath the earth, hidden from human eyes, soaking through generations of teachers and students, passing through prayer, contemplation, memory, and oral transmission. At a certain appointed moment, that stream rises to the surface through a specific person. In the eyes of the masters of Kabbalah, Moses de Leon was not simply an author sitting down to compose a new book. He is seen as one who received a stream of knowledge that had existed before him, then transmitted it into the visible world through language and writing. According to that understanding, the value of the Zohar does not rest on whether every sentence came from Moses de Leon alone, but on the fact that he became the bridge through which a sacred tradition was revealed at its proper moment in history. Today, many people use the word channeling to describe this phenomenon. But in Jewish language, the closer word is Kabbalah, meaning receiving. The student receives from the teacher. The teacher receives from those who came before. The generations receive from the Torah, from tradition, from the life of prayer, from inner revelations, and from the fear of God. Instead of rushing to conclude that Moses de Leon was right or wrong, perhaps we should view this matter more simply. History does not always provide clear answers. There are books written by one person, while the ideas inside them were accumulated from many generations before. There are also traditions passed from one person to another for so long that it becomes very difficult to know exactly where they began. Therefore, the important question is not only whether Moses de Leon wrote the Zohar himself, but also what ideas he inherited and received from those who came before him. If he was the primary author, the Zohar remains one of the most powerful mystical works ever created in medieval Jewish history. If he compiled it from older sources, then he did what many traditional believers still believe. He brought a deeply buried stream of knowledge back into the world. If he wrote, received, and arranged scattered fragments of tradition all at once, then the Zohar becomes the product of an entire spiritual river, rather than something whose vitality can be fully explained by one single hand. The remarkable point lies in the influence of this text. The Zohar changed the way countless people read the Torah. It led readers into the idea of Ein Sof, the Infinite One, beyond every image the human mind can grasp. It speaks of the 10 Sephirot as channels through which divine power is expressed. Wisdom, understanding, mercy, justice, beauty, foundation, and kingship. It gives the reader the sense that the universe has structure, that history has direction, and that the human soul participates in the struggle between order and chaos through every concrete choice. This is what carries the Zohar beyond an academic dispute. A merchant may read it and remember the contract he distorted in order to gain a greater profit. A father may hear it and think of the will he is preparing one that may divide his children. A rabbi may look into it and see the danger of using a holy name to preserve reputation, money, and control. A person who once lied under oath may realize that the human court closed the file, but the conscience continues reopening the case during sleepless nights. The Zohar causes the reader to look at these things with a different eye, because it reminds him that every human choice takes place before God. It shows the reader that sin rarely begins with a great crime. It begins with one moment of allowing oneself to bend the truth. One time withholding money that should have been paid. One time using power to force someone weaker into silence. One time hiding wrongdoing under moral language. And after many such moments, the soul becomes accustomed to darkness until it mistakes that darkness for normal life. What the Zohar wants to say is very simple. The things we do every day have greater meaning than we think. It takes the greatest concepts of Kabbalah and brings them back to the places where human beings actually live. The work desk, the courtroom, the family meal, the sickbed, the room where an elderly person sits alone with his memories. In those places, right and wrong are no longer distant ideas. They appear in very familiar things, a signature on a document, whether a promise is kept, how we treat those weaker than ourselves, and whether we dare to live truthfully before God when no one else is watching. For this reason, the complex origin of the Zohar also offers a deep lesson. A text may pass through human hands through controversy, through doubt, and through gaps in history. But when it awakens, the conscience pulls the reader out of self-deception and reminds him to live more righteously before God. Its power goes beyond its outer shell. This is also true of human beings. A transmitter may carry the limitations of his own age. A vessel may have cracks. But the water inside can still ease thirst if it leads people toward truth, humility, and upright living. The Zohar, therefore, should be entered with reverence rather than cheap curiosity. It also needs to be read with alertness rather than blind belief in every mysterious rumor. Tradition and scholarship may ask different questions, but both lead the reader toward a clear truth. The Zohar became one of the most influential texts in the history of Jewish mysticism, because it touches the question that human beings in every age must face. Does this reality contain only what ordinary eyes can see? Or is there a deeper order watching every choice we make? If the soul truly stands before God, then do the things people call secrets remain secret at all? If every word, every signature, every betrayal, every righteous act leaves a mark in the invisible life, then how must human beings live when night falls and only the conscience remains face to face with the Most High? That is why the story of the Zohar still holds such power. It begins in the dark cave of Shimon Bar. Yochai passes through the mysterious manuscripts of Spain in the hands of Moses de Leon, and then touches the very real rooms of modern life. Offices, sick rooms, courtrooms, family dinner tables, and the nights when a person lies still, yet still hears the conscience knocking at the door. But before we go further, one thing must be made clear. The Zohar is not the kind of book written for entertainment, nor is it a collection of mystical secrets meant to astonish the listener. For centuries, people have debated its origin, defended it, criticized it, studied it, and sometimes feared it. But no matter which side of the debate one stands on, very few deny that the Zohar has left a deep mark on how millions of Jews understand God, the soul, and the meaning of life. And from here, we will begin to open the layers of that book one by one, not to hunt for mysterious things, but to understand why an ancient text could cause many generations to believe that behind the visible world, there is still a deeper reality at work. The hidden truth about angels and the disguising garment of the Bible. After the story of Shimon Bar Yochai, the Kaf, and the controversial appearance of the Zohar in the hands of Moses de Leon, a deeper door begins to open. That door leads into an idea that may feel very strange to anyone accustomed to reading the Bible only in a direct way, focusing only on the layer of content that appears on the surface of the story. In the Zohar, angels are different from the familiar image often seen in paintings hanging inside Western churches. They go far beyond the picture of beings with childlike faces, golden hair, white wings, and gentle eyes. That style of depiction belongs to religious art from many centuries later. Created so human beings could imagine them more easily, pray more easily, and feel closer to them. The Zohar looks at the matter in a different way. Instead of focusing on the outer form of angels, it asks, what are angels truly, and what happens when they appear before human beings? Angels, in the view of Jewish mystical tradition, are beings from the world above. Their nature is spiritual, powerful, radiant, and more intense than any physical form. They are created to carry out the commands of God, to guard the boundaries between the heavenly realms, to deliver messages, to protect order, and at times, to step into human history at special moments. However, when an angel is sent into the human world, their appearance does not unfold in the way people often imagine. According to the Zohar's view, the material world has very clear limits. Human beings live in bodies of flesh and bone, so everything we perceive must pass through those limits. The human eye can see only a small portion of the light that exists in the universe. There are kinds of light that ordinary eyes cannot see at all. The human ear can also hear only a certain range of sound. Many frequencies that are too high or too low still exist, yet we cannot hear them. Even the forces of nature, such as thunder, earthquakes, or great storms, are enough to make human beings feel small and overwhelmed. The Zohar uses that reality to explain something deeper. If human beings cannot even receive the fullness of phenomena belonging to the natural world, how could they directly face the full sacred reality of the heavenly realm? According to this understanding, the essence of angels and the powers belonging to God go far beyond ordinary human perception. For that reason, the human eye can receive only a very small part, the human ear can hear only a very small part, and the human body cannot fully endure powers that exceed its own nature. Therefore, when a being from the sacred realm enters the human world, it must be covered in a suitable form. The Zohar calls this covering garments. This is an important idea in the entire symbolic system of the Zohar. Angels do not appear in their original essence. Instead, they put on a form that human beings can see, hear, and interact with. That garment both allows them to carry out their mission in history and allows the material world to receive their presence. For that reason, what human beings see in many biblical stories is often not the full essence of the angel, but a form that has been put on in order to fit this world. When Abraham receives 3 mysterious visitors by the oaks of Mamre in Genesis chapter 18, the story is told like a very ordinary encounter. An old man sits at the entrance of his tent in the heat of the day. He sees the visitors approaching quickly, invites them to rest, brings water to wash their feet, and serves bread, a calf, and milk. On the surface, the story looks like a scene of hospitality in the ancient desert. But readers of the Bible understand that this is a sacred visitation. These visitors are directly connected to the promise concerning Isaac and the judgment of Sodom. From the Zohar's perspective, that detail carries great meaning. The heavenly realm enters Abraham's tent through a form that human eyes can bear. The message of heaven comes in the appearance of travelers from the road, sitting beneath a tree, eating and speaking within the very ordinary rhythm of human life. Then, in Genesis chapter 19, 2 angels come to Sodom in the evening. Lot meets them at the city gate, bows down, and invites them into his house. The people of Sodom see only 2 unfamiliar visitors. Lot recognizes the seriousness of the moment and urgently protects them. As night falls, the atmosphere in the city quickly becomes frightening. The crowd gathers in front of Lot's house, revealing the corruption that has long been rooted deep inside Sodom. The tension rises hour by hour. Then, when the sun comes up the next morning, the city's time has run out. The judgment of God begins to be carried out. If we look only at the direct meaning of the story, this is simply the account of 2 strangers entering a city, sinking into moral decay. But when read through the interpretation of the Zohar, this is the moment when angels take on human form in order to participate in a very important event in history. They appear as human beings walk on the road, like human beings enter a house like human beings. Yet the mission they carry comes from God. This also helps the listener understand why the Bible repeatedly describes angels in human form. An angel appears as a messenger, at one moment as a traveler on the road, at another as a figure appearing near a tomb. Sometimes they are seen as a warrior holding a sword, and at other times they bear the appearance of a man dressed in radiant clothing. Behind that form is the mission. Behind the mission is the one who sent them. And behind what the human eye can see is a much greater layer of reality. The Zohar uses the image of garments to explain this very point. The garment allows the sacred to enter history, while the material world still keeps its own shape. Through that garment, Abraham can welcome the visitors into his tent. Lot can bring the angels into his house. The prophets can hear the message. Human beings can stand before what exceeds them and still have enough strength to listen. But something even more astonishing appears in another aspect. According to the Zohar, this principle does not apply only to angels. It also applies to the Bible itself. For the Zohar, the Torah is like a living being with many layers. Historical stories, journeys, battles, long genealogies, laws, scenes of judgment, and covenant promises are all the outer garment. That garment is necessary because human beings live inside time geography, family, war, hunger, and memory. Human beings need stories in order to enter truth. Yet that is only the first layer that leads the reader deeper into the meaning within. A person reading Genesis may remember Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, Cain killing Abel, or Noah building the ark before the great flood. These are foundational stories of the Bible, and they are already deeply important in themselves. But from the Zohar's perspective, these stories do not only speak of people who lived long ago in the past. They also reflect things that are still taking place inside the human heart today. Temptation, rebellion, jealousy, violence, repentance, and the mercy of God. Similarly, when reading Exodus, many people remember Moses confronting Pharaoh, the 10 plagues falling upon Egypt, and the people of Israel crossing the Red Sea. That is the historical layer of the story. But the Zohar suggests that behind those events, there is a wider meaning. It is the story of human beings being bound and then set free of arrogant power standing against God, and of the way He leads people out of slavery and into freedom. A person who reads the story of the tabernacle and sees only acacia wood, gold, silver, linen, the lampstand, the table of bread, and the Ark of the Covenant will see a description of an ancient ritual. But in the mystical reading, every material, every measurement, and every position points to a sacred order, the place where human beings are taught how to draw near to God through reverence, purity, and order. This is what the Zohar means when it calls the stories of the Torah garments. The outer garment helps the reader enter. It gives them characters, places, actions, time battles, promises, judgments, and deliverance. But the reader who stops at the garment will miss the body beneath it. The one who goes deeper will see the commandments, the moral structure, and the way God guides human life. The one who goes deeper still begins to touch the soul of the Torah, the presence of the Creator, breathing life through every word. The Zohar uses very strong language when speaking about this. It compares the person who sees only the outer story to someone standing before a person wearing a magnificent robe, but focusing only on the fabric. That person counts the stitches, the colors, and the folds, then thinks he has understood the whole person standing in front of him. But beneath the robe there is a body. Inside the body there is a soul. And it is the soul that makes that person alive. The Torah is the same. The story is the robe. The commandments and moral structure are the body. The sacred meaning within is the soul. And this is where the story becomes much more interesting. From this point on, the Zohar no longer allows the reader to look at the Bible in the familiar way. It seems to invite them through another door, where things that once seemed dry or difficult to understand begin to carry an entirely new meaning. The long genealogies in Genesis begin to carry meaning about lineage, memory, and the preservation of the promise. The wars in the books of Kings open questions about loyalty, false worship, and the cost of power. The laws in Leviticus become a language of distinction between purity and impurity, between life placed within the order of God and life sliding into chaos. Imagine a very ordinary scene. A family sits in a small room after the father has died. On the table lies an old envelope. The lawyer opens it and begins reading the will. At first glance, it is only lines of writing on paper. But as each sentence is read aloud, the atmosphere in the room changes. Someone lowers his head in silence. Someone clenches his hand. Someone suddenly realizes something the father had never said while he was still alive. The paper remains the same paper, but what truly lies inside is not the ink and the words. It is memory, affection, responsibility, things kept hidden for many years, and sometimes the truth about the members of the family themselves. Or think of a courtroom. An outsider sees only a person standing up and speaking a few short words under oath. Everything seems very ordinary. But for the person standing before the court, those words may decide an entire life. One truthful sentence or one lie can be enough to change the fate of many people. The Zohar wants the reader to approach the Torah in a similar way. The reader may begin by following the characters acting within history, but at some point, the focus no longer remains on observing the biblical characters. Those stories gradually begin to shine upon the reader's present life. When reading about Cain and Abel, the reader encounters an event from the earliest days of human history. Yet jealousy, the wound of not being recognized, or discomfort at another person's success are still very familiar experiences today. When reading about Pharaoh, the image appears of a king who repeatedly refuses to change even after receiving many warnings. That story also calls to mind the times when a person knows he is going in the wrong direction, but still stubbornly clings to the old choice. When reading about the people of Israel at the foot of Mount Sinai, we see a community losing patience and wanting something visible to rely on. From there comes the question of whether people today are also seeking safety in things easier to grasp instead of placing their trust in God. When reading about David, the reader sees a king who received many blessings, but still stumbled through serious wrong decisions. That story reminds us that one unwise choice can leave consequences that continue for a very long time afterward. For that reason, the stories in the Bible do not belong only to the past. They touch the choices, attitudes, and actions human beings still face every day. From the Zohar's perspective, this is an important part of reading the Bible. At first, attention is often directed toward Abraham, Moses, David, or Pharaoh. But the more the reader reflects, the more he realizes that these stories are quietly asking questions about his own life. Through them, he recognizes qualities worth preserving. At the same time, weaknesses that were once overlooked or avoided gradually become clear. From there, very direct questions begin to appear. If I were in that situation, how would I act? Who am I resembling in this story? Am I following what is right, or am I trying to justify what I want to do? That is one of the reasons the Zohar has drawn the attention of many people across many centuries. This work does not only explain the stories of the Bible, it also urges the reader to look back at himself. Reading the Bible in this direction does not stop at remembering characters or events. It leads the reader to think about motives, choices, fears, ambitions, and personal responsibility. However, the Zohar also emphasizes that this approach must go together with caution. Searching for deeper meaning should not become a way to prove that one understands more than other people. Nor should it become a reason to ignore practical responsibilities in daily life. In the spirit of the Zohar, deeper reading has meaning only when it helps human beings live more truthfully, more humbly, more responsibly, and with greater reverence for God. Therefore, the disguising garment in the Zohar carries two meanings at the same time. Angels put on the garment of this world so they can enter history in a way human beings can endure. The Torah puts on the garment of story law and genealogy so the human mind can enter a deeper truth. In both cases, the garment is mercy. God lowers what is high into a form human beings can receive. He sends messengers in human appearance. He places truth inside stories of family war. Desert temple bread, blood, water, stone, and oath. He uses the most familiar things to draw human beings closer to things far greater than themselves. And the story does not end there. Imagine a young student sitting beside the light of an oil lamp, listening as an old rabbi reads each line from the Zohar. At first, the student hears only the familiar stories of Abraham, Moses, or the angels. But then the teacher stops at a very small detail, a word that seems ordinary, and begins opening layers of meaning the student has never considered before. From one line about light, the story leads to the first light of creation. From one line about water, the story leads to the rivers of Eden. From one flame, the story turns back to the burning bush before Moses. Each image is like a secret door. The student realizes that these symbols appear again and again throughout the Bible, not by accident. They seem to be linked together into an invisible network, stretching from Genesis to the books of the prophets. And at that very moment, the Zohar begins to lead the reader even further. No longer only separate stories. No longer only characters who appear and disappear within history. Each fragment begins to connect with the others, as though behind the entire Bible, there exists a larger picture whose shape can slowly be seen only by those patient enough to follow it. So how can we tear open that garment and see the soul of the book? The Zohar gives the reader a key, an interpretive system called Yardes, meaning the Garden of Wisdom. In Hebrew, this word means garden. Imagine it this way: you walk up to a large garden. If you only stand at the gate, you can see only a few trees on the outside. But if you are willing to step further in, you begin to see the paths branching out. Go a little deeper, and you begin to notice which trees love water, which trees are in bloom, and why the gardener arranged everything in that particular order. PARDS works exactly that way. It teaches us that a verse of Scripture always has many layers of meaning to explore. The first level is Peshat, the literal meaning. This is what immediately appears before your eyes: the characters, the setting, and the action. When Genesis tells us that Adam and Eve lived in the Garden of Eden, met the serpent, ate the forbidden fruit, and were driven out, that is Peshat, it is like reading a report of an event. The second level is Remez, the hinted meaning. At this level, you begin paying attention to the clues. The tree, the water, the serpent, the nakedness, or the sound of God's footsteps in the garden. In the cool of the evening, these are not merely descriptive details. They are footprints in the sand leading you toward a conclusion. This story is speaking about something far greater than secretly picking an apple. The third level is Dirash, the moral lesson. This is where you begin asking questions about human nature. Why did Adam stand silent while Eve was being tempted? Why do human beings, the moment they do something wrong, immediately try to cover it up and blame one another? At this level, Eden becomes a mirror reflecting the avoidance of responsibility and those moments when we choose to follow our own will instead of doing what is right. The fourth level is Sod, the secret meaning. This is where the Zohar truly shines. Sod goes straight into the mystical core. It sees Eden as a picture of human nature before it was distorted by greed, fear, and ambition. Here, Adam represents all humanity in its original state. The serpent embodies the evil inclination, the subtle voice that invites us into a dangerous gamble. PRDES, therefore, is a journey from the gate of the garden into the center. You read the story. You recognize the symbols. You examine your own morality. And finally, at the deepest level, you face the question, who are we? And what truly happens when we turn our backs on the original order. Now let us use this key to open the most famous story in history, Adam, Eve, and the serpent. On the outer layer, Peshat, the story is very clear. God creates human beings, places them in a beautiful garden, and entrusts them with caring for it. They are allowed to eat from everything except the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Then the serpent appears, twists the word of God, and tempts Eve. Eve eats, then gives it to Adam. Their eyes are opened, they feel shame, and they cover themselves with fig leaves. When questioned, Adam points to Eve, and Eve blames the serpent. Then they are expelled and begin a difficult life outside the garden. That is the plot. But the Zohar tells us slow down for a moment. From the very first detail, Eden carries more weight than a piece of land planted with green trees. The Zohar sees Eden as the original state of human awareness, when we clearly knew where we belonged. Life had order, work had meaning, and obedience to the rules was regarded as wisdom. Yet right in the middle of the garden stood a forbidden tree. Why would God place a boundary at the very center of the most perfect place? Because love and loyalty must be tested in order to become real. If you are allowed to do everything, obedience carries little meaning. When there is a clear boundary, human nature is revealed. Does that sound familiar? This is extremely practical. You can be proud of your integrity when you have never stood before an opportunity to commit fraud worth millions of dollars. You can believe you are faithful when you have never faced temptation. You only truly know who you are when you stand before a private choice where there is no camera and no one watching except your own conscience. The tree in the middle of the garden placed Adam and Eve in exactly that position. It turned loyalty into a choice. Then the serpent appears. The Zohar does not see the serpent merely as a talking animal. It represents the whispering voice within us, the inclination to decide right and wrong for ourselves in ways that serve our own interests. The serpent's method of attack is what is truly frightening. It does not rush in and tear them apart. It begins with a question: did God really forbid you? It makes the boundary appear unclear. Then it turns Eve's eyes toward the tree. A few moments earlier, it was forbidden. Now Eve sees that it is pleasant to the eyes, good for food, and desirable for gaining wisdom. Her attention shifts from the command to the immediate benefit. Real-life temptation works in exactly the same way. An executive knows that distorting a report is wrong, but the year-end bonus appears so clearly before him. A person favors a relative and justifies it as family loyalty. Temptation rarely wears the mask of a demon with fangs. It usually knocks on the door with a reason that sounds extremely reasonable. The serpent says to Eve, "Eat it, and your eyes will be open. You will be like God, knowing good and evil for yourself." That is the age-old ambition of humanity, to have power through a shortcut to enjoy every privilege without being governed. When Adam and Eve ate the forbidden fruit, they placed themselves at the center, taking the authority to decide good and evil away from God and claiming it for themselves. The result: they knew more, but they also carried more. They became more aware of themselves, but they were filled with shame, fear, and the habit of blaming others. Scripture says that after they ate, their eyes were opened and they realized they were naked. This is a very costly detail. Before the fall, nakedness was innocence. After the fall, it became shame. Their bodies had not changed, but their lens had become distorted. They quickly took fig leaves to cover themselves and hid among the trees when they heard the sound of God. This may be the most truthful scene about human nature in all of Genesis: doing wrong, then looking for something to cover it. A fig leaf in ancient Eden may be the clever excuses, an altered report, or a false moral image we build around ourselves today. The fig leaf is the way we try to preserve our image after conscience has already caught us. Then God calls Adam. "Where are you?" It was not that God had lost Adam. That question forced Adam to look at his own position. You have left trust. You are hiding behind fear. You chose concealment instead of confession. When questioned, Adam points to Eve. Eve points to the serpent. The script of blame was born at the very moment sin appeared. Does that sound familiar? In a failed project, people easily blame the person who gave final approval. Sin produces concealment. Concealment gives birth to fear. Fear leads to blame. And blame pushes human beings away from one another and away from God. But Eden does not contain only punishment. Before sending them away, God makes garments of skin for them. Human beings used fragile fig leaves to cover themselves, but God gave them stronger protection. Even in the very moment of judgment, mercy was still present. Read at the deepest level. Sod the Zohar sees this not as the end, but as the beginning of a long journey. Human beings leave the state of innocence and enter a real world, a world of sweat, pain, responsibility, and growth. Adam must work the ground. Eve passes through the pain of childbirth. And from that point forward, every generation must face one question. Will we live according to what is right, or will we listen to the whisper that tempts us to cross the line? Seen through this lens, Eden is no longer a fairy tale. It is your story, my story, and the story of today. It is there in the office, when you consider changing a few numbers in order to close a contract. It unfolds at the family dinner table, when you look for someone to blame instead of offering an apology. It returns during sleepless nights, when you wonder whether the wrong decision made years ago can still be repaired. Each of us has a garden to care for family, career, health, and conscience. In the middle of that garden, there is always a boundary tree. And we always hear the competing voices, the voice of conscience, the whisper of greed, and the quiet murmur of self-justification. The Zohar makes this ancient story come alive because it gives us a way to read through all four levels. You see the plot. You decode the symbol. You draw the lesson. And finally, you see into your own soul. When you pass through all four layers of Pardes, the ancient characters suddenly become a mirror for adulthood, where we understand all too well the meaning of money, temptation, regret, and loss. But this is only the starting point. If one story in Scripture was designed with such a refined 4-layer structure, then another enormous question immediately erupts. What structure was the entire universe designed with? The Zohar answers with one of the most astonishing concepts in Kabbalah, Ein Sof, the Infinite One, and the 10 Sephirot, the channels of energy that connect supernatural power with the material world. From the Garden of Eden, we are about to step into a much larger map, the map of the creator of the soul and of the entire hidden architecture behind reality. The secret of Kabbalah. Why does a world created by God contain so much suffering? Some questions only appear after a person has lived long enough. When we are young, we are often busy with work, family, money, and the goals we are trying to reach. But as we grow older, after we have lived through joy and loss, success and failure, we begin to slow down and ask deeper questions. Why does this world operate this way? Why do love and sacrifice exist side by side with betrayal and cruelty? Why have I tried to live well, yet still faced so much misfortune? And if God truly created everything, where is He standing in the middle of all this chaos? When Kabbalah peels back the Bible through deeper lenses, it does more than retell old stories. It raises a foundational question behind this entire universe. What machine is truly operating? That is Ein Sof, the Infinite One. The Zohar uses this term to speak of God before any beginning existed. This is the one beyond every name, every form, and every concept the human mind can imagine. Think about it. When you walk into ancient churches in Europe, you often see enormous paintings of God portrayed as a majestic king, with silver hair and beard, holding a scepter and looking down upon the world. Those paintings are magnificent, and they help us feel His power. But Kabbalah is like a friend placing a hand on our shoulder and saying, "Hey, do not look only at the painting. Any image drawn by human hands is only a faint shadow of a reality far greater than itself." We can see the traces of God through history. The Red Sea splitting in two, prophecy echoing through time, the wicked being judged. But then we begin to wonder, before heaven and earth were formed, where was He? How can we describe the one who created all things, yet does not belong to anything created? The feeling is like standing before the ocean in the darkness of night. At first you see the horizon, but the farther you look, the deeper the darkness becomes, and you realize you are facing infinity. Words like power, love, or justice are still true, but they suddenly feel far too small. Ein Sof is that infinity. The one who stands outside time gives life to all things and is never limited by them. But this creates a great puzzle if God is infinite. How can a finite world exist beside Him? How can human beings, trees and rivers receive life from such an enormous source of energy without being consumed? Kabbalah answers through the system of the 10 Sephirot. You can understand the Sephirot as 10 channels of energy, 10 stages of transformation through which the will of God enters the material world. Imagine a kingdom. The first intention exists in the mind of the king. But for that intention to become reality, it must be translated into law, into the rulings of judges, into tax policies, and into patrols moving through the streets. The intention belongs to the king, but the people receive it through many different layers. The Sephirot work in a similar way, but on a cosmic scale. God remains one yet. His will is stepped down through channels so the universe can receive it. That is why in the Bible, God sometimes appears profoundly merciful, at other times strict in judgment, and at other times careful and detailed in His guidance. The 10 Sephirot are arranged in a specific order. At the top is Keter, the crown. It is like the first flash of intention in the mind of the king before any command is given. It is the deepest and purest will. Next is Chokhmah wisdom. This is the eureka moment, a flash of illumination. It is like suddenly realizing that the reason your family has been breaking apart is favoritism that has lasted for years. You understand the truth before you can even put it into words. Then comes Bina understanding. If Chokhmah is the lightning flash, then Bina is the engine of analysis. Realizing your mistake is one thing. Sitting down, examining why you were wrong, and making a plan to repair it is another. Bina helps turn illumination into a clear strategy. From here, the system enters practical moral life. Chesed-loving kindness is unconditional giving. It is like Abraham opening the door of his tent to welcome strangers or pleading for the life of an entire sinful city. Chesed is the hand that is always open to help protect and forgive. But blind kindness can produce disaster. Giving unlimited money to a child addicted to gambling harms him. Forgiving a person who abuses power without removing him from office tramples the victim once again. And that is when Gevura discipline or judgment must appear. Gevura is the boundary. If Chesed is the open hand, then Gevura is the hand that holds back at the right time. A society with Chesed will feed the poor, but a society with Gevura will imprison the person who steals charity money. A family needs forgiveness, but it also needs discipline in order to name wrongdoing correctly. The perfect balance between Chesed kindness and Gevura discipline creates Tiferet harmony. This life requires more than a soft heart or a head of iron. A mature person knows how to combine both. They know when to place a comforting hand on someone's shoulder, when to apply steel-like discipline, when to speak, and when to remain silent in order to protect the truth. The next three levels are Netzek endurance, Hod humility, and Yesod foundation. Netzak is the ability to grit your teeth and keep going when everything is difficult, like a father staying awake all night to care for a sick child. Hod is the ability to bow your head and admit you were wrong. And Yesod is the commitment that turns a promise into practical action. The final level is Malkut kingship. This is the point where every sacred intention touches the ground. Kindness, discipline, and wisdom no longer remain in theory. They become concrete action in the family, in work, and in the way you treat other people. Malkut is connected with the Shekinah, the presence of God within the human world. When you understand this, you will realize that the structure of the Sephirot is also the design map of your own soul. The Bible says that human beings were created in the image of God. Kabbalah says this does not mean that God has two hands and two legs like us. It means that you carry within yourself a structure that reflects these 10 Sephirot, the ability to recognize truth, Chokhmah, the ability to change Bina, the ability to love Chesed, the ability to set boundaries, Gevura, the ability to endure Netzach, and the ability to keep promises, Yesod. This is where Kabbalah becomes an extremely uncomfortable personal examination for those who have lived through real life. It forces you to ask yourself, how are you using these channels of energy? Is your kindness truly helping, or is it enabling? Is your discipline protecting the truth, or is it only an excuse to release anger? Is your wisdom making you more humble, or is it turning you into someone who manipulates others? The tragedy of life is the misdirection of these structures. Kindness misdirected becomes weakness. Discipline misdirected becomes tyranny. Leadership misdirected becomes manipulation. But the larger question still remains. Why is a universe created by God so full of injustice and brokenness? By the 16th century, Rabbi Isaac Luria offered an explanation that shook the thinking of his time through three concepts: Tzimtzum, Shevirat HaKelim, and Tikkun. Tzimtzum means withdrawal or contraction. Luria explained that in order for a finite universe to have space to exist, the Infinite One had to withdraw, making room for freedom for time and for human responsibility. Next is Shevirat HaKelim, the shattering of the vessels. Imagine this: a family receives a vast inheritance. If they lack love and maturity, that inheritance will tear the family apart through lawsuits. The gift itself is not wrong, but the vessel receiving it is too weak, so it cracks. In the same way, when power falls into the hands of the greedy, when love becomes control, or when intelligence comes with arrogance, that is when the vessels shatter. This shattering creates suffering, injustice, and chaos in our world. And that leads to the final goal: tikkun, repair. This is the part of Kabbalah with the greatest moral force. We do not live in a perfect world. We live in a world that needs to be restored. And tikkun happens through your extremely specific choices. Repair happens when you choose to tell the truth, even when lying would benefit you. It happens when a chief executive officer shares profits fairly instead of exploiting employees. It happens when you step forward to apologize and correct a mistake instead of using power to cover it up. Suffering is not merely a sentence. It is an alarm pointing to the places where the structure has cracked, the places where power and money are being used for the wrong purpose. It demands that we act not with empty theoretical words, but with decisions that cost money, self-respect, and even a career. In truth, Kabbalah uses the full weight of its philosophy to pin you firmly to the ground. It forces you to sit directly in front of the inheritance document, the business contract full of loopholes, the family dinner table already cracking apart, and the conscience inside your own heart. If the concept of repairing the universe sounds too vast and abstract, try looking at it through the familiar philosophical lens of the East, the law of cause and effect. In its deepest essence, the sages of the East and the masters of Kabbalah are pointing toward the same truth. Everything in the universe is tightly connected, and every action leaves a trace. When you make a righteous decision, such as keeping your promise when it costs you, or dividing property fairly, even when you hold the power to manipulate the outcome, you are planting a good cause. That cause is an act of stitching together a tear in the universe. On the other hand, every time you deceive a business partner, drain the strength of those under your authority, or speak cruel words to satisfy your ego, you are directly planting seeds of destruction. The bitter fruit you later harvest is the inevitable reaction of a universe that you have helped tear open even further. The sky may be vast, but the net of cause and effect is always waiting, receiving and gathering every intention we release. Therefore, the question placed before each person is extremely practical. In the small kingdom, you have power to govern your company, your family, your relationships. Are you planting seeds of repair, or are you scattering more brokenness? Are you acting like a steward who fears the Creator, or living like a person blinded by desire, ignoring cause and effect in order to gather everything for yourself? And if the human soul truly carries within it the power to plant goodness and restore the world, what happens when that power is seized by greed, desire, and pride? Who or what force is working hard to obstruct this repair, constantly urging us to sow evil karma? The next journey will take us away from the architecture of the universe and into the fiercest battlefield of all the silent war inside the human soul. The inclination toward evil and the dark forces pulling the strings behind our wrong choices. The mystery of Sitra Achra, the other side, and the origin of evil. After passing through the great architecture of the universe, through the 10 channels of energy and the soul's mission to repair the world, a darker and much larger question begins to press in. If the Creator is perfect, if the universe was designed according to a beautiful order, and if human beings were given a heart to love and a mind to gain wisdom, then through what opening did evil slip into this story? For those who know the book of Enoch, the answer may seem very clear: the fallen angels. Enoch tells us that the Watchers deserted their post, left their place in heaven, and came down to earth to take human women. They fathered the giant Nephilim, then taught humanity deadly secrets: how to forge swords and spears, how to mix poisons, spells, seductive arts of beautification, and every method of manipulating the mind. The world became filled with blood and violence until the heavens had to open and pour down the great flood to cleanse it. That is a world-shaking epic. But the Zohar does not stop at that outer layer of events. Instead of merely retelling how the angels fell, the Zohar points directly at a deeper mystery. What allowed that fall to happen in the first place? What lies deep inside the source code of the universe that makes it possible for a radiant angel to betray? Why can a sacred gift be turned into a weapon? And why can an earth created to nurture life become a navel of violence and desire? The Zohar's answer is contained in one terrifying concept: Sitra Achra. In ancient Aramaic, Sitra Achra means the other side. The name itself exposes the nature of the problem. This is the world of darkness that stands in complete opposition to holiness. If the tree of life is the system that transmits the Creator's mercy, justice, and order, then the other side is a perfect copy machine where all those powers are bent and distorted to serve one thing alone: the ego. And this is the point where you truly need to pay attention. Kabbalah views evil in a far colder and more realistic way than cheap images of demons. Forget the horn-tailed monsters carrying pitchforks to frighten people in the dark. That is only the imagination of the crowd. In the world of the Zohar, evil has structure. It is a sophisticated system. Its greatest deception is its ability to imitate holiness. It dresses itself in moral clothing, then quietly drains the conscience from within. That is why Sitra Achra is truly terrifying. It never appears with a hideous face that you can easily recognize and reject. It always approaches with a very reasonable appearance. Dictatorial control is dressed up as responsibility to protect the community. Cruel favoritism is disguised as family love. The scams that crush people in business are justified with the word strategy. The hunger to hold on to power is praised as an effort to preserve tradition. And sometimes, even when you cowardly stand still and watch someone being trampled, it whispers to you that this is simply keeping the peace. Sitra Achra operates most strongly when we begin finding beautiful names to plaster over our sins so that at night our conscience can sleep in peace. It is the master of turning greed into responsibility, selfishness into wisdom, and hatred into personal justice. To explain how evil takes root in life, the Zohar uses one word, kelapot, meaning the shells. Think about a lie. At first, it is very small. You only want to cover up a problem to avoid a rebuke. But to protect the first lie, you are forced to give birth to a second lie, then a third. Gradually, you no longer live in the real world. You live inside a script you have directed yourself. One day, telling the truth becomes more terrifying to you than continuing to deceive. That is when a shell has hardened like scales around your conscience. Money works in the same way. You hide a sum of money that does not belong to you and tell yourself only a little. No one will become poor because of this. The next time you do it again, more smoothly. Then you convince yourself that it is a reward for your cleverness. Years pass, and the action that once made you break into a cold sweat now becomes normal. You may even proudly pass that trick on to someone else. That is when a kelapa has successfully taken root. The conscience has been numbed. That is how the Zohar shows us the nakedness of evil. It is not far away. It sits comfortably inside religious rituals, where people use prayers and sacred language to cover personal interests. It crawls into the family living room through an unjust inheritance document. It pounds the table in the conference room through decisions that exploit employees. It stands proudly in a courtroom with arranged testimony. And it lies awake at midnight beside older people when they realize they have spent their entire lives justifying the same mistake. The other side is the land we willingly enter when we take the intelligence God gave us and turn it into schemes and dirty tricks. Courage becomes cruelty. Discipline becomes chains. Love becomes jealous possession. Faith becomes a tool for keeping power. Every time we live uprightly, keep a promise, protect the weak, and bow our heads to admit wrong, the other side is cut off from its source of life. But wherever sin is wrapped in a respectable shell, there it takes root and stretches out its tentacles. Within this dark kingdom, there is one embodiment that truly makes people shudder, Samael. Ancient tradition gives this figure many frightening titles, such as the Accuser or the Angel of Death. But if we peel away the heavy layers of myth under a deep psychological lens, Samael is simply a voice. It is a whisper filled with dark power, constantly urging us to step across fragile moral boundaries. It awakens the most primitive arrogance that has existed since the Garden of Eden, planting in your mind a sharp question: why should you bow and live under rules when you can completely define the rules for yourself and become your own master? Samael is absolutely not an invisible ghost drifting through cemeteries to frighten human beings. The embodiment of this force is the instinct of extreme arrogance, the desire to crush everything around it in order to glorify the self alone. You will see this power clearly in the image of a director gritting his teeth and ordering his staff to rearrange the financial books regardless of legal risk, just to cling to a position of power that is already shaking. The power of that lie also appears vividly inside organizations, where top leaders are ready to push their own employees out as scapegoats in order to wash their hands when a project collapses. It even exists in ordinary arguments at the moment, when you know perfectly well that you are wrong. But personal pride makes you stiffen your neck. Keep making excuses and fight to win at any cost. This force represents a fatal temptation that has brought down countless glorious empires and destroyed countless lives. The temptation to place the throne of the ego above objective truth. It spreads an extremely dangerous illusion of invisible privilege. Through that illusion, those who hold supreme power become convinced that the law was born only to serve their interests. Those wearing religious robes deceive themselves into thinking that their sacred title is enough to shield them from every law of cause and effect. Or on the smaller scale of a family, this illusion also urges a man to believe that simply because he is the breadwinner, bringing money home, he automatically has the right to trample on the feelings of his wife and children without caring about the consequences. When human beings lock themselves inside those mental traps, evil has quietly won a perfect hand. The manipulation runs so smoothly that no dark force needs to reveal itself. There is no dramatic display and no supernatural magic is needed. The tragedy begins with one tiny but devastating shift in perception the moment a person begins to love the imaginary scepter in his hand more than the truth standing plainly before his eyes. But Samael never walks alone. Standing right beside him is an even more haunting figure, Lilith. In Kabbalah, if the Shekinah is the warm, nurturing, and sacred presence of God among the community, then Lilith is the complete reverse side of that feminine principle. She is destructive seduction, a fertility that gives birth to chaos, a form of closeness meant only to drain life and break covenants. Samael and Lilith form a deadly pair for humanity. Samael is the cold-blooded desire for domination and power. Lilith is seductive desire and the overturning of every covenant. When power and lust join hands, you have a weapon of mass destruction. It shatters a community when a leader uses power to manipulate the vulnerable. It pierces a marriage through secret affairs wrapped in elegant reasoning. It defiles a religion when faces that preach morality from a high platform live filthy lives behind closed doors. If you remember the event of the Watchers in the Book of Enoch, you will recognize this pattern. The angels fell because they abandoned their place and chased desire. They gave knowledge to human beings, but turned that knowledge into fuel for violence and arrogance. The Zohar takes that very terror, shrinks it down, and places it directly inside the human chest. The Zohar asks, why can a wonderful gift be misused? Why is intelligence so willing to serve lies? Why does power born to protect become a prison? Why can bodily desire, once the brakes are cut, burn down an entire family and leave scars for generations? The answer is the other side. It does not change the form of everything. It only changes the purpose of everything. And that is why true evil is not merely an impulsive act. Behind a wrong action is an entire inner compass that has been bent out of shape for a long time. When you lie to yourself long enough, misery begins to look exactly like nature. A man who commits adultery will click his tongue and say that his marriage had been cold for 10 years. A businessman who pushes workers' wages to the breaking point will shrug and say that the marketplace is a battlefield. A child fighting with siblings over every meter of land will scream that he is only demanding fairness. Those reasons sound smooth and flawless. But beneath those words lies a frightening downward slide. Human beings are exhausting their minds to protect their interests and image, instead of stopping to face the truth. The coldest part of Sitra Achra is its ability to borrow the shell of morality. Look at a religious organization with grand choirs, splendid vestments, and sermons that bring people to tears. But if the poor are rejected there, if the guilty are protected because they have money, and if the person who speaks the truth is silenced, then the other side has already taken the front row seat in that sanctuary. Look at a family during the holidays, still gathering in large numbers, still taking radiant, smiling photos to post on social media. But if behind the door there is cruel favoritism, deception over land titles, and resentment compressed for decades, then the other side is breathing in rhythm with them inside that house. You may have your name on every golden charity plaque and sit in the VIP section at community events. But if your decisions drive other people into a corner, if you use reputation to whitewash mistakes, and if you only apologize when you are pushed against the wall, the Zohar would call your life a shell. The covering is glamorous, but the soul inside has begun to rot. So why would the Creator allow such a dark system to exist? Because this universe operates on free will. You are only truly faithful when you have the full power to betray. You are only truly upright when a lie could bring you millions of dollars and you still refuse it. You only truly choose God when your ego is screaming to be king and you force it to kneel. A world with real freedom must come with real risk. The other side is that test of risk. It roots itself in concealment, arrogance, addiction, and greed. But Kabbalah offers an absolute liberation. Sitra Achra is not invincible. It is only a parasite. It has power only when you open the door with your own hands and invite it in. And the moment you turn sharply back toward the truth, repent, and personally repair the damage you have caused, its octopus-like tentacles are immediately cut off. That is why the Zohar shatters cheap demon stories. It does not allow us to blame evil on invisible forces out in a cemetery. It drags that fear back to its real starting point, the human conscience. Do not spend your strength looking for demons in dark places or under the bed. It is present in things that are painfully ordinary. A vague, hidden clause in the contract you just gave to your partner, the oppressive attitude you show toward employees beneath you, or the way you look away when you see injustice happening right before your eyes. The two darkest powers in human being. Cold-blooded tyranny, Samuel, and greedy desire. Lilith rarely sees you all at once. They always begin with excuses that sound very pleasant. An abusive boss often begins with the thought, I have devoted so many years. Sitting in this position, I deserve a little priority. A person who betrays the family rarely plans everything from the beginning. They simply click their tongue and think life is already too stressful. I deserve some compensation and a little pleasure before everything erupts into a bitter divorce or a noisy lawsuit. It began with hundreds of small compromises in the mind years earlier. Before a person becomes numb, there were many nights when they felt the sting of conscience, then soothed themselves with some reasonable explanation or borrowed work and borrowed alcohol to cover it up. Darkness grows through those easy little shrugs. And the only way to cut it off is not through empty prayers, but through practical acts of correction that are painful in their concreteness. It is the moment when a boss accepts paying out of his own pocket to return the wages he cut from employees. It is the moment when a father admits he showed favoritism and grits his teeth as he tears up the will to divide things fairly again. It is the moment when someone dares to end a wrongful relationship immediately and accept the consequences, even if a storm follows. That is not merely ordinary damage control. It is the moment you tear apart the control wires of evil with your own hands and decide to reclaim authority over your life. No matter how dark it becomes in the view of Kabbalah, this force is ultimately only a test from God. It exists to expose our true face in moments when no one is watching. The harsh reality is that evil rarely knocks on the door through occult rituals or demons appearing in visible form. It enters life very gently. Its seed begins at the moment you bargain with the truth in order to close a profit. It grows when power is used to crush the weak, and it takes deepest root when we cover a terrible deed with reasons that sound reasonable and emotionally convincing. And this brings us to one final boundary. Evil is not an invisible force floating somewhere in outer space or hiding inside mythological stories. The true and fiercest battlefield lies inside your own mind. From here, we will look directly at the quiet tug of war that takes place every day inside every human being. It is the struggle between the voice of conscience that wants to live uprightly and the selfish instinct ready to trample everything just to satisfy the ego. Because according to the Zohar, the collapse or restoration of an entire family, a business, or a life is sometimes decided in one extremely ordinary instant, the moment when you know perfectly well what is right, but your hand is still hesitating, lingering because the temptation of immediate gain is too great. The world's destroyed before Genesis. After stripping away the true face of Sitra Achra and the shells that cling to the human conscience, the Zohar begins to reveal a secret on a cosmic scale, a secret powerful enough to completely overturn the way you read the Bible. Genesis opens with a deeply familiar sentence. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. In the mind of most of humanity, that sentence is the absolute starting line. It is point zero. Before that moment is an undefined and mysterious emptiness. After that moment comes the sequence of the 6 days of creation, the Garden of Eden. Adam, Eve, the serpent, and the entire wheel of history begins to turn. But in the ancient writings of the Kabbalistic tradition, scholars raised a shocking possibility if this earth is the final stage chosen for human beings to live upon. Could there have been other stages built up and torn down before us? Look slowly at the second verse of Scripture. And the earth was tohu vavohu. People usually translate this phrase as formless and empty, but in ancient mystical language, tohu vavohu carries a completely different shade of meaning. It does not describe an empty space where nothing had ever existed. It describes a devastating chaos, a pile of ruins, a stage that had already passed through a cosmic flood and was lying there, waiting for order to be established again. And from here, the Midrash Genesis Rabbah makes a bold declaration. Before creating our world, God had created countless other worlds and shattered them with his own hand. That destruction did not come from an accidental technical error by the Creator. Each time a new order was built, It collapsed for one reason alone: the ultimate corruption of morality. Those worlds were erased because the scale of conscience had been completely broken. They were versions in which power was used to trample the weak lies, rose to become law-greed, swallowed human kindness, and crime was loudly celebrated. When the rot from within became so corrupt that it could no longer be rescued, when the people there tore apart every final moral boundary with their own hands, that my world had to be crushed into dust so everything could begin again. That painful cycle of birth and destruction repeated again and again, until the present earth appeared, and he said, "It was good." Reality, modern science through its own path, has also found traces of times when the earth was wiped clean on a massive scale. Scientists call them mass extinctions. These are moments when the biosphere was struck so violently that entire ecosystems suddenly vanished from the fossil record. One world of life closed, and a completely different world rose to replace it. The story that Earth is not unchanging began in a laboratory in Paris at the end of the 18th century. At that time, the scientific world still believed that the world was a stable entity, and that every creature created by God still existed somewhere on this planet. But the naturalist Georges Cuvier overturned that belief. When he held in his hands the bones of mammoths and ancient elephants that had been excavated, he realized a shocking truth. These giant creatures were not hiding in distant forests or unexplored continents. They had truly been erased from the face of the earth. For Cuvier, the history of Earth was not a calm, straight line, but more like a book with torn pages in its record. Each layer of rock you dig up is a chapter where an old world filled with corals and giant reptiles appears in abundance. But as soon as you move into the next layer, everything disappears in a deeply mysterious way. From that discovery, the scientific world gradually understood that this planet had gone through 5 great mass extinctions, the 5 largest and deepest scars in the fossil record. Each time, life was pushed to the brink. The first was a climate tragedy at the end of the Ordovician period, about 444 million years ago. When enormous ice sheets covered the continents, sea levels suddenly dropped. For creatures living along shallow marine shelves, the busy cities of the ancient oceans, that was like a death sentence. Nearly 90% of marine species disappeared, leaving the ocean floor empty and silent. Then came the most terrifying destruction in history, the Great Dying at the end of the Permian period, about 252 million years ago. This was not ordinary climate change, but the fury of the Earth's interior. Continental-scale volcanic eruptions in Siberia threw billions of tons of toxic gases into the atmosphere. The sky darkened, acid rain poured down, and the oceans were suffocated by a lack of oxygen and acidification. Life on Earth was almost erased, with 96% of species destroyed. Creatures that had dominated the world for millions of years, such as trilobites and ancient coral groups, never appeared again. And of course, the most shocking event in the human imagination is the asteroid impact in Mexico about 66 million years ago. A giant space rock slammed into the Yucatan Peninsula, creating an impact crater nearly 200 kilometers wide. The collision caused a massive earthquake, and dust covered the sky, blocking sunlight for many years. The food chain collapsed completely. The rulers of the land throughout the Mesozoic era, the dinosaurs, were wiped out almost immediately. But in the ashes of that Cretaceous age, the small mammals that had previously been forced to hide in dark burrows finally had the chance to rise. From the lesson of fossils, we recognize a cold law. Earth does not compromise with any ruler. And the story of collapse is not only written in stone, it also appears directly in human history. A NASA-funded study has indicated that as many as 30 advanced civilizations once existed on Earth. They reached technological heights far beyond even us today. Yet in the end, all of them vanished into nothingness. This study began in 2018 when a groundbreaking paper by scientists from NASA and the University of Rochester opened a shocking debate about what is known as the Silurian hypothesis. This study did not claim that we had ever seen aliens. Instead, it raised a much bolder question: if an industrial civilization had once existed on Earth millions of years ago, would we be able to find traces of it? The research team argued that if a civilization developed to a level like ours today, it would leave behind geological fingerprints that could not be erased. These would not be pyramid statues or city ruins, because after millions of years, such things would be completely crushed or absorbed into the earth. The fingerprints here would be changes in the chemical composition of sediment layers, from atmospheric carbon levels, radioactive isotope content, microplastics, to durable industrial waste. Based on mathematical models of growth and resource consumption, the researchers raised the possibility of a recurring cycle rise and collapse. Across the hundreds of millions of years of this planet's history, it is entirely possible that groups of living beings reached a high level of complexity, built societies, exploited resources, and then declined. Look at France in the 18th century. It was once a center of power for the entire world, with a culture that led its age, but that very strength became its trap. France expanded its territory too far spent, beyond what its budget could control, and pushed its currency into severe devaluation. When chaos erupted, French authority dissolved. Although France still exists, it remains a vivid example of the chaos model, a scenario that has repeated itself again and again through thousands of years of history. Even before that, 3,000 to 5,000 years ago, the historical record had already documented many complex civilizations advanced in ways not inferior to us today, yet still easily pushed toward collapse. Their lifestyles may have been different, but a collapse model always existed, challenging the long-term survival of any complex society. Even further back, more than 10,000 years ago, we can see traces of civilizations that preceded the Inca, the Olmec, or ancient Egypt. They existed, prospered, and then disappeared without leaving any clear explanation. A typical example is the Maya masters of the Mexican jungle. They were using rubber for industrial products 3,000 years ago, building great pyramids and possessing sophisticated writing techniques. Yet, like many other great empires, they disappeared under mysterious circumstances. The number of repeating patterns is so large that scientists find it very difficult to ignore. Applied mathematician Safa Moteshari, in his model known as Human and Nature Dynamics, affirmed that growth and collapse form an inevitable cycle of history. From the Roman Empire, the Mauryan Empire, the Gupta Empire, to the mighty empires of Mesopotamia, all of them testify to one thing: complexity and creativity are not insurance cards for eternal survival. Evidence of extraordinary advancement in the past is even found on stone surfaces. A striking example is the 30,000-year-old Ica stones, which depict people holding telescopes to observe heavenly bodies, an invention that humanity would have to wait until the age of Galileo to recover. This affirms that in the past, advanced entities once existed before us. The research indicates that technological development may improve resource efficiency, but it also brings with it a habit of excessive consumption. Resource scarcity combined with a declining moral foundation pushed these civilizations into endless internal conflicts and finally into extinction. Looking back at what is happening on Earth today, we cannot help but feel a chill. Science and technology are exploding, yet the ecological environment is being seriously damaged. We are living in an age of scientific and technological explosion, but at the same time, we are allowing the ecosystem to be wounded to an alarming degree. Human morality seems to be sliding downhill without brakes when individualism is worshipped to an extreme, when material wealth becomes the only measure of value, and when people are ready to do anything for financial gain. These old tracks of ruin are no longer merely stories in books. They are realities appearing right before our eyes. Could it be that we are now walking down the very same road of destruction once taken by civilizations that were reset in the past. From the enormous scars on Earth's crust, humanity is forced to learn a lesson in humility. We need to understand that the existence of modern human beings is not the final destination of history, nor is it a default condition guaranteed forever. In truth, we are only latecomers, building the future upon the ruins of worlds that were once far stronger, more dominant, and far more enduring than us. The Earth has cleansed its own surface many times, and each time it began again from the remaining fragments. But whether through asteroid impact, volcanoes, or climate change, all of it leaves one unified lesson. Life is very strong, but also extremely fragile. At this point, science and the ancient intuition of Kabbalah suddenly meet at one haunting point. The Zohar says that the worlds before Genesis were destroyed because of imbalance. Science sees this through the crisis of ecological systems. A family, a nation, or an ecosystem all share the same fatal weakness. When the forces that preserve order are overwhelmed by the forces that break it apart, collapse becomes inevitable. Look at the way the small worlds in life today are beginning to crack. A family may be very prosperous in wealth, but if favoritism and bitterness are carefully hidden beneath the appearance of peace, sooner or later, the will becomes the flame that burns family love to ashes. A corporation may have enormous revenue, but if it is built on exploitation and lies, then from the chief executive officer down to the employees, everyone is living inside an order on the verge of collapse. An individual may be successful and well known, but if they use power to manipulate others and use a moral shell to cover the rot within, they are no different from a king of Edom waiting for the day of ruin. The Zohar does not tell us about old worlds to satisfy our curiosity about archaeology. It warns us about the law of cause and effect. The dinosaurs and ancient coral reefs were not at fault. They were erased by global events. But human beings are different. We have intelligence, conscience, and the power to choose. If a civilization has enough technology but lacks humility, if a society has enough data but lacks justice, then it is walking the very path once taken by the destroyed worlds. The Earth remembers every crisis in stone. Those fossil boundaries are silent reminders. Do not imagine that you are the exception. Yet within that terror, there is still a ray of hope. Each time the Earth passed through disaster, it did not die completely. It kept what was still alive, then rebuilt from there. And human beings are the same. The history of Earth teaches that life always has the chance to begin again. But that process often comes with very costly prices. The present world has been given a chance to stand firm, and each of us is participating in that work through extremely practical decisions, returning money that was taken, speaking the truth even when we hold the advantage, protecting the weak, even when no one is watching, and abandoning a double life. That is how we avoid letting our small world fall into the same track as the orders that once collapsed. And this brings us to the core mission that Kabbalah places on every person tikkun repair. Not the repair of geological rocks, but the repair of the cracks in your own soul and community before everything goes too far to be rescued. That is where the true journey home begins, not in some faraway place, but right now, when you dare to stand before the mirror and ask yourself, am I building something that can endure? Or am I helping this world break even further? The mystery of ageless souls and the contract of reincarnation in the Zohar. We have just passed through the story of destroyed worlds, radiant civilizations that turned to dust, cities left buried beneath layers of earth, empires that once believed themselves invincible and then vanished from the map. Stone can crack bones, can decay. Inscriptions can be worn down by rain and wind. But in the vision of the Zohar, there is one thing that passes through all those layers of collapse: the soul. This is one of the most shocking secrets of Kabbalah. The soul, according to the Kabbalistic view, existed and passed through many things before entering its present body. A human being enters life in a specific family, in a specific age, with a specific body. They have a birth certificate. They have a name, they grow up in a home, learn a language, carry childhood memories, pass through work, marriage, sickness, loss. And then at the end of life, the body returns to the earth. Most of the Western world is used to seeing human life along that straight line, being born, living one life, dying, and then the soul entering eternity to receive reward or punishment. The Zohar opens another way of seeing. In Kabbalistic tradition, this concept is called Gilgul Neshamot, meaning the cycling of souls. The word Gilgul carries the meaning of turning, revolving, moving in a circle, passing from one state into another. Neshamot means souls. When placed together, Gilgul Neshamot speaks of the soul returning to earthly life in different identities in order to complete what remains unfinished. This can be understood simply like this. Gilgul belongs to Jewish mystical tradition, especially developed strongly in Kabbalah and later in the Safed school of Isaac Luria. It must be distinguished from the orthodox teaching of many branches of Judaism or Western Christianity, which usually emphasize one life judgment and eternity. For the Zohar and the masters of Kabbalah, the soul can pass through many stages of life because its work of repair is still continuing. To put it more simply, Kabbalah sees the body as the clothing that the soul is wearing in this life. You have a personal name, a family, a job, an age, a social position, and a very specific life story. All of those things belong to the present. But according to Kabbalah, the soul does not begin on the day you are born. It existed before you had the name you carry today. And it may have passed through other journeys that ordinary memory no longer retains. Imagine a person moving from one city to another many times during life. In each place they live, they have different work, different friends, and different circumstances. The soul in the Kabbalistic view is similar. It may pass through many different stages of existence before arriving in the present life. Therefore, what Kabbalah cares about is not who the soul used to be or where it once lived. The more important question is what the soul has not yet completed, what lesson it has not yet finished, learning what mistake it has not yet repaired, or what responsibility it has not yet fulfilled. What matters is not how many times the soul has lived, but what lesson it still has not finished learning. According to the Zohar, the soul carries what it has done in the past. Good things, mistakes, wounds. It has caused others responsibilities left unfinished and lessons not yet fully understood. When a human life ends, the body disappears, but if those matters remain unresolved, the journey of the soul continues. For this reason, the purpose of returning is not merely to live one more time, but to complete what remains unfinished and to become better before God. At this point, many people in Asia will find this idea quite familiar, because when hearing that a soul can return to complete what remains unfinished, many people will immediately think of concepts deeply rooted in Eastern culture such as reincarnation, karma, or cause and effect. Although the language and belief systems are different, both are trying to answer a very ancient human question. Why is each person's life so different? And why do some things seem to have been prepared before we even became aware of our own existence? For thousands of years, Buddhism, Hinduism, and many Eastern philosophical systems have spoken about birth and death, reincarnation, and karma. Human beings sow causes and reap consequences. Actions, words, thoughts, and desires create effects that go beyond one short life. If a debt has not been resolved, it can continue into another stage of existence. If a wound has not been healed, it can return in new relationships, new circumstances, and new lessons. That is why, when reading about Gilgul in Kabbalah, many people may feel as though they are encountering a familiar idea under a different name. Of course, the two traditions are not exactly the same. but the similarity is large enough to make the reader pause and think. What draws attention is that a mystical Jewish text developed in a historical, cultural, and religious environment, very different from the East, also touches the same question. Why are human beings born with different burdens, difficult to explain relationships, and challenges that seem to have been waiting for them before they even knew how to name themselves? In other words, both the East and Kabbalah do not see human life as merely a chain of random events. Both suggest that what happens today is connected to deeper choices that the soul has carried along its journey. But precisely here, the Kabbalistic view begins to open an entirely different depth. And this is also where Kabbalah reveals its very distinctive character. In many Eastern traditions, reincarnation is often viewed as the cycle of birth and death that the soul must transcend. Human beings practice spiritually in order to escape bondage to desire, karmic force, and suffering, moving toward liberation. Kabbalah, however, emphasizes the mission of repair. The soul returns to this life for tikkun, meaning restoration, correction, and the completion of what is still lacking within itself and within the world it has affected. In other words, according to the Kabbalistic view, the present life is not merely a series of random events, but the place where the soul continues to handle unfinished matters. A person may repeatedly encounter the same kind of challenge under different circumstances. Some people repeatedly stand before the choice between personal benefit and honesty. Some people are always caught in controlling or dependent relationships. Some people often have to face questions of responsibility, courage, or forgiveness. Kabbalah explains that these recurring situations may be connected to the work of repair that the soul needs to complete. What remains unresolved will appear again in a new form until the person learns to respond differently. For example, someone who once abused power may experience circumstances that help them understand the feelings of the vulnerable. Someone who once caused harm through greed may have to face the consequences of dishonesty in relationships or work. Someone who once avoided responsibility may repeatedly be placed in situations that force them to make difficult decisions. This is also why many people feel that certain meetings in life leave a deeper impression than usual. There are people who feel close to us from the very first meeting, even though there has not been much time for contact. On the other hand, there are also people who make us feel uncomfortable or tense without any easy explanation. Some relationships seem to have a powerful impact on our growth. A spouse who forces us to learn how to listen and change parents who make us face old wounds. Children who test our patience. Business partners who bring lessons about trust, or superiors who make us weigh personal benefit against what we believe is right. Eastern philosophy may call this karmic connection, karmic debt, or unresolved karmic entanglement. Kabbalah explains it through the language of Gilgul souls, meet again because there is unfinished work between them. The old story changes clothing. The names change. The social roles change. The historical setting changes. But the inner responsibility still finds a way to return. Look at a negotiation table in modern life. Two people sit across from each other with a contract clauses, signatures, penalties, shares, and control rights in front of them. On the surface, it is only a business deal. But from the Kabbalistic view, this may be a very deep meeting between two souls. One person stands before the opportunity to use an advantage to push the other into harm. The other stands before a lesson in alertness, boundaries, and the ability to protect what is right. If in a previous life they were caught in power betrayal or money, today's meeting becomes the place where that lesson returns in a very practical form. The same thing can happen in a family. An elderly father writes a will pen in hand with the assets accumulated over a lifetime before him. He can divide things fairly in order to preserve peace among his children. He can also favor the child who knows how to please him, then leave behind years of lawsuits after he passes away. For Kabbalah, that moment goes far beyond paperwork. It may be a test point for the soul. Will this person repair an old tendency toward power and favoritism? Or will he continue creating a new debt for the souls around him? Even marriage can be viewed through the lens of Gilgul. A spouse who exhausts you every night may touch the deepest immature places in you. Anger, the need to control, fear of abandonment, the habit of silence, selfishness, or wounds from the past. Kabbalah does not use this to justify violence, betrayal, or abuse. The person who is harmed needs protection, truth, and concrete action. But in relationships that can still be repaired, Gilgul makes a person ask a very serious question. What within me is being called out to grow? This is where the idea of the soul contract is often mentioned. The word contract may sound strange, but imagine it in a very ordinary way. When you accept a new job, you usually receive a job description with it. It clearly states what you need to do, what you are responsible for, and what duties you must complete. According to the Kabbalistic view, the soul is also entering life with its own mission. Of course, the Zohar does not use modern language like this. But this comparison helps us imagine it more easily. The soul does not come into the world as a completely blank sheet. It carries things that need to be learned, weaknesses that need to be repaired, unfinished lessons and opportunities to choose better than before. Think about the things that repeat again and again in your life. Some people keep meeting others who take advantage of their kindness. Some people repeatedly fall into toxic relationships. Some people always struggle to manage money, even though they earn quite a lot. Some people rise into leadership positions and then repeatedly face the question of power and fairness. From the Kabbalistic point of view, these repetitions are not necessarily random. They may be lessons that the soul has still not completed. Therefore, the question, why was I born in this exact age, becomes much deeper. Why were you born into this family and not another? Why do you carry your own very specific psychological wounds? Why did you meet exactly the boss who always makes you feel looked down on or forced to prove your worth? Why do you keep encountering the same kind of person in love or at work? Why do challenges around money, power, honesty, or forgiveness keep returning under different forms? Kabbalah suggests that the place where you struggle the most is often the place where the soul is being called to grow the most. Take a simple example. A person always feels controlled by others. They meet a controlling boss, a controlling spouse, and even friends who want to make decisions for them. After many years, the lesson may not lie in changing everyone around them, but in learning how to set boundaries, express their needs clearly, and protect their own value. Or a person is repeatedly betrayed in matters of money. They lend money and lose it, enter partnerships, and get deceived, sign contracts, and suffer loss. From the perspective of tikkun, the lesson may not only be the pain of betrayal, but also the learning of alertness, responsibility, and the ability to see the truth clearly instead of believing only according to emotion. However, this must be understood very clearly in order to avoid a very dangerous misunderstanding. When Kabbalah speaks about tikkun, it is not saying that all suffering is the fault of the person who is suffering. A child who is abandoned is not responsible for being abandoned. A person who is abused did not cause the abusive behavior of another person. A family that loses a loved one does not deserve that tragedy. Suffering is real. Wounds are real. And those who carry wounds need to be protected, heard, healed, and treated with justice. What tikkun cares about is not the search for blame in the victim. It is concerned with the question of what happens afterward. When the event has happened, when the wound is present, when life is no longer the same as before, what will a human being do with that pain? Some people allow pain to turn into resentment that lasts for many years. Some people use their own wounds to wound others. But some people from within brokenness learn compassion, maturity, and the strength to end patterns that have lasted too long. According to the Kabbalistic view, we do not always control what happens to us. but we always stand before a choice about how we respond to it. And precisely at that place of choice, the soul's work of repair begins. This is the difference between merely enduring suffering and transforming suffering into an opportunity for growth. A person who sees life only as a sentence is easily trapped in resentment and feels that every pain is only punishment. But a person who sees life as a journey of tikkun approaches it differently. Instead of only asking why this happened to them, they begin asking what they need to learn and what they need to change through that circumstance. They examine themselves. What within me needs to be transformed by God? What is preventing me from loving others as myself? What bitterness, pride, or selfishness am I still refusing to let go of? Is there a truth I need to speak in love instead of continuing to hide? Is there someone vulnerable who needs me to defend and support them? And what am I still justifying, even though my conscience knows it is not pleasing to God? These questions are not meant to condemn human beings, but to help them recognize where their soul needs to be healed and grow more mature. The Bible repeatedly calls human beings to examine themselves before God. Jesus taught that what defiles a person is not what enters from the outside, but what comes out from the heart. Therefore, true change does not begin with circumstances, but with a heart that knows repentance and obedience. Look at very practical situations in life. A person with authority in the family, workplace, or community always stands before an important choice to use power to serve or to dominate. Jesus said that whoever wants to be great must become a servant. Power is given not to make others afraid, but to protect, guide, and support those who are weaker. A person facing money also stands before the test of conscience. There are profits easily gained through dishonesty clauses that can be twisted promises that can be forgotten when no one checks. But the Word of God teaches that whoever is faithful in little will also be faithful in much. Integrity is not measured by the amount of money earned, but by the way that money is created. There are moments when people witness wrongdoing, but choose silence because they fear losing their benefit or safety. Yet the Bible teaches us to open our mouths to defend those who cannot defend themselves. Sometimes obedience to God requires the courage to stand on the side of truth, even when it costs us something. There are also people who spend their entire lives chasing reputation, status, and recognition from others. They may achieve many things that society admires, yet still feel empty inside. Jesus once asked, "What does it profit a person to gain the whole world and lose his soul?" That question still carries its full weight for every generation. These things bring us to a question that human beings in every age have wrestled with. Why do the righteous still suffer hardship? Why does it sometimes seem that the wicked still prosper? Why do people who live uprightly still have to face sickness, loss, and grief? The Bible does not deny this reality. The book of Job, the Psalms, and many other parts of the Word of God record the cries of people who do not understand why they must suffer. But instead of promising that good people will always have easy lives, God promises that He is with those who belong to Him in the very midst of adversity. Life, therefore, is not the place where human beings always receive what they want, but the place where faith is tested and refined. Some trials are connected to money. Some are connected to power. Some are connected to faithfulness, forgiveness, humility, and love. It is precisely in those difficult circumstances that the true nature of a human being is often revealed. A person who has been betrayed will understand the value of faithfulness. A person who has suffered injustice will understand the importance of mercy. A person who has lived in lies will recognize the freedom that truth brings. A person standing before sickness will understand that health, money, and status all have limits. Suffering does not automatically make a person better. It can make a person bitter, or it can make a person mature. The difference lies in whether they allow God to work within their heart. That is why the Bible always calls for repentance and the renewal of the mind. God does not only want human beings to recognize what is wrong, He wants them to walk in a new way. The person who was once selfish learns to love. The person who was once deceitful learns to live truthfully. The person who once wounded others learns to heal and restore. When we look at life under the light of the Word of God, we begin to see difficult relationships in another way. Some people enter our lives to teach us patience. Some people make us recognize weaknesses we previously refused to face. Some people force us to become more mature in the way we live and love. Some people help us understand what true forgiveness means. But one thing must be said clearly. Love according to the Bible does not mean accepting wrongdoing. God does not call human beings to endure violence, abuse, or oppression. There are moments when the right thing to do is to speak the truth. Set clear boundaries, seek justice, and protect those who are being harmed. The path of healing is not the same for everyone. Sometimes it begins with a sincere apology. Sometimes it means correcting what we have done wrong. Sometimes it means returning what we took, or making up for the damage we caused. Sometimes it means having enough courage to stand up and speak the truth. And sometimes it means deciding to end a cycle of harm so that our children do not have to carry it into the next generation. This is something that people who have passed through many years of life often feel very clearly. The longer people live, the more they understand that some things do not disappear simply because time passes. A betrayal from decades ago can still return in memory. A debt of conscience can still trouble a person whenever they remember it. A child who was treated unfairly can carry that wound into adulthood. And there are fathers who, when they reach old age, finally realize that their children are distant from them, not because the children are ungrateful, but because for many years they used the authority of fatherhood to control instead of love and guide. In the language of Gilgul, these are accounts that have not been closed. In the language of Tikkun, they are the places where the work of repair needs to begin. Let us return to the idea of the soul contract. A real contract usually has clauses, obligations, deadlines, and consequences. The signer can read carefully or sign in haste. Some people think they are clever when they find a way around one clause, only for that loophole to become a dispute years later. Life is the same. The soul enters this world with things it must face. There are people it will meet, weaknesses that will be tested, opportunities that will be given, and moral debts that will rise at the proper time. You may see this in an upcoming business deal. The contract on the table contains a vague clause. You know it will harm the other person, but the benefit is too large. If you sign, you may win for a few months. But from the Kabbalistic view, perhaps your soul has just met an old test again. Will you use intelligence to serve truth, or use it to take the larger share for yourself? You may see it in marriage. The spouse who exhausts you every night may be drawing out the parts you always hide. The habit of running away, coldness, anger, the need to control, or the fear of being hurt. If the relationship can still be healed, Tikkun requires truth, responsibility, and real change. If the relationship has become a place of violence or abuse, Tikkun may begin by protecting the life and dignity of the one who has been harmed. You may also see it in work. A terrible boss can turn every day into a burden. But precisely, there may also be a test of courage, boundaries, and self-respect. Will you allow fear to turn you into someone silent before wrongdoing? Or will you find a wise way to act in order to protect the truth without destroying your own life? That answer may determine whether the soul is repairing an old lesson or repeating it in a new form. At this point, the combination of the Eastern law of cause and effect and the Kabbalistic idea of Tikkun creates a very powerful way of looking at resentment. Resentment makes a person see themselves as the absolute victim of life. Tikkun makes a person ask, in what part of what is happening do I need to change or take responsibility? The law of cause and effect reminds us that everything we do leaves a result sooner or later. Gilgul suggests that those results do not necessarily stop within one human lifetime, but may continue to affect the journey of the soul. However one sees it, both lead to a very practical thought. Instead of only blaming circumstances, we should ask what we need to learn from what is happening. That does not make the pain disappear, but it helps human beings find meaning and direction within that pain. A person who has been betrayed can spend the rest of life becoming bitter, or use that experience to become more faithful to others. A person who has been humiliated by poverty can rise up and then look down on the weak, or use new power to protect those who once stood where they stood. A person who is wounded by family can pass the same kind of wound onto their children, or name the wound correctly, and build another way of living inside their home. That is the core point of tikkun. Life will continually place situations before you, so you can learn and grow. What matters is how you will respond. Continue repeating the old mistake or choose a more righteous action in order to change yourself. Therefore, when the Zohar speaks of souls that cycle through lives, it is not merely presenting a secret about the past. It forces the reader to look directly at the present. Everything is right in front of us. The person you need to forgive, the person you need to apologize to, the money that needs to be returned, the truth that needs to be spoken, the boundary that needs to be set, the power that needs to be used correctly, the habit that needs to end, and the wound that must stop being passed on to others. From here, everything is no longer a mystical idea to ponder for amusement. If the soul truly carries unfinished lessons, then every choice in the present carries more weight than we think. One deliberate deception can open another cycle of consequences. One upright action can end something that has lasted far too long. One sincere apology can heal a crack that has been there for years. One fair act of compensation can return dignity to someone who once suffered loss. And sometimes, a single quiet decision to do what is right is enough to change the direction of the entire inner journey. That is also the moment when each person needs to stop and look at their own life. The risky contract you are about to sign may be only a business deal in the eyes of the world, but in the journey of the soul, it may be a test of integrity. The spouse who exhausts you may be only a marriage problem in the eyes of society, but at a deeper level, it may be the place where you learn truth boundaries, responsibility, forgiveness, or the courage to leave what is wrong. The dishonest decision you are calculating for profit may bring money for a few months, but it may also pull your soul into a new debt, forcing you to meet the same lesson again under another form. According to the Zohar and Kabbalistic tradition, the present life is not a chain of disconnected events. It is the place where old lessons return with new names, new faces, new positions, and new circumstances. You may call it karmic connection, karma gilgul, or tikkun. Whatever language you use, the final question remains very clear. Will you continue following the familiar path, repeating the choices that once caused brokenness? Or will you have enough courage to act differently and close what should have been completed long ago? That is also the door that opens to the next subject. If the soul does not begin on the day we are born, if the people and circumstances around us carry meanings deeper than what ordinary eyes can see, then the important question is this: how can we recognize the lesson that the soul has been assigned in this present life? According to Kabbalah, the challenges that repeat again and again in life rarely appear at random. Very often, the very place that troubles you most, hurts you most, or makes you struggle the most is the place where the work of the soul's repair is unfolding most intensely. Many people still assume that the idea of the soul returning again and again to learn lessons and correct mistakes is only a special doctrine of Eastern philosophy, or at most a private secret preserved by Kabbalah scholars through the Zohar. But history exposes a truth far greater than that. The idea of a repeating cycle of lives was never confined to one geographical border or one specific culture. Astonishingly, it once existed right at the foundation of Western faith, discussed openly before it was cut away and buried by the political power of the church. If we set aside the doctrines that have been fixed into place in the modern age and turn back to the oldest ancient writings, a completely new door opens, leading us straight into the core of the next mystery. The phenomenon of reincarnation, hidden behind the secret teachings of Jesus. The phenomenon of reincarnation, hidden behind the secret teachings of Jesus. As mentioned above, reincarnation has long been considered a concept that exists only in Eastern philosophies, such as Buddhism or Hinduism. For Christianity, including Catholicism, the common belief and official doctrine have been deeply planted in the minds of billions of people. When a person closes their eyes for the last time, their soul will face the judgment of God. The righteous will enter the radiant kingdom of heaven, while those burdened with sin will be cast into eternal hell. There is no concept of returning to the world in another body. In fact, for a very long time, people assumed that the idea of early Christians believing in reincarnation was nothing more than a baseless rumor. But physical discoveries beneath the ground changed everything scholars once thought they knew. In 1945, an Egyptian farmer digging soil for fertilizer near the town of Nag Hammadi accidentally found a sealed clay jar. Inside that jar were 13 leather-bound papyrus books. Scientists conducted radiocarbon dating and confirmed that these were not copies from later centuries. They dated directly to the first centuries of Christianity. Researchers call these writings Gnostic texts. The content of these documents shows an early community of believers that focused heavily on direct spiritual knowledge. They clearly recorded that the soul must pass through many different physical forms until it reaches true understanding. This is physical evidence showing that a significant group of faithful people at that time viewed living many lives as an obvious reality. Only 2 years later, in 1947, shepherds searching for a lost goat in the Qumran caves near the Dead Sea stumbled upon another historical treasure. It was the Dead Sea Scrolls. Archaeological analyses confirmed that these writings belonged to a Jewish community known as the Essenes, who lived during the same period as Jesus. Among the hundreds of documents that were translated, historians noticed that the Essenes held a very specific view of the soul. They believed that the body was only a temporary dwelling place, while the soul was immortal and capable of residing in many different physical bodies. Because Jesus lived and preached within this very cultural and historical setting, researchers point out that there is a very high possibility that he encountered, discussed, and shared these teachings with his disciples. This belief was not some strange idea held by a few isolated groups living in the desert. It was openly discussed by some of the leading intellectuals of the early church. A typical example is Origen of Alexandria, who lived from the year 185 to the year 254. Origen was not an unknown figure. He was the most influential theologian of his age. In the surviving historical documents, Origen used logical reasoning to argue that the soul could not naturally come into existence at the exact moment a child was born. The soul must have existed long before entering the human body. Depending on its actions in a previous state of existence, the soul would descend into the material world to experience, learn, and purify itself. If it had not yet reached the necessary condition, it would be forced to return in another physical body. This argument is, in essence, the process of reincarnation presented through an extremely serious theological lens. Even before the time of Origen, Church Father Clement of Alexandria also left behind important historical writings. Clement was a direct inheritor of the traditions passed down from St. Peter the Apostle. In his writings, Clement recorded a historical truth. Jesus did not teach everything publicly to the crowds. He had a separate system of oral instruction reserved only for his closest disciples, such as Peter, James, and John. Clement confirmed that these private lessons focused on explaining the nature of the soul and the process of its physical rebirth. The authenticity of this entire matter lies in the fact that we are holding real physical manuscripts. Before 1945, Modern historians knew about these beliefs only through the later records of condemnation produced by the Roman Church many centuries afterward. But when the Nag Hammadi texts and the Dead Sea Scrolls were brought into the light, secular linguists and historians translated the original words of those early communities with their own hands. The dating results produced by modern technology are numbers that cannot be denied. The existence and works of Origen and Clement are also historical facts recognized around the world. The fact that early Christians knew about and believed in reincarnation is not a baseless modern speculation. It is a historical reality supported by physical evidence, one that generated real debates for centuries before the official religious structure decided to completely ban this concept in the year 553. So if reincarnation truly was mentioned, where is it hidden in the Bible today? Experts and researchers of ancient texts have pointed out very subtle yet extremely weighty fingerprints places where Jesus seems to have indirectly confirmed the existence of past lives. One of them appears in the Gospel of John, chapter 6, verses 30 through 32. Someone in the crowd did not hesitate to ask him, "Then what sign can you show us so that we may see it and believe you? What will you do? Our ancestors ate the holy provision in the wilderness. As it has been written, he gave them bread from heaven to eat." Then Jesus answered them, "Truly, truly, I tell you, it was not Moses who gave you the bread from heaven, but it is my Father God who truly gives you the bread from heaven." Pay attention to the change in pronouns. The crowd speaks of our ancestors, meaning those who lived in the time of Moses centuries earlier. But Jesus answers with the phrase, "you." He does not say Moses gave your ancestors bread. He speaks directly. It was not Moses who gave you the bread. According to the mystical interpretation, Jesus is pointing to a deeper truth. The people standing there questioning him that day were the reincarnations of the Jews who had once followed Moses through the wilderness many centuries before. This repetition of pronouns is not a random coincidence. Going back to the Old Testament, in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 18, verse 15, Moses himself once gave a prophecy with a similar structure. "O God, the Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from among you, from your brothers. You shall listen to him." Moses did not say that your descendants would hear the prophet, the Messiah. He affirmed that you would hear him. This statement implies that the souls of those listening to Moses at that time would reincarnate and return, and that they themselves would be the ones to directly witness the appearance of Jesus in the future. If this evidence is so powerful, and if belief in reincarnation once existed within the early Christian community, then why did it vanish completely from modern doctrine? The answer does not lie with God, but with the intervention of worldly power. At the beginning of the Middle Ages, teachings about past lives still existed, but they had been pushed into the shadows and turned into esoteric teachings. The brutal turning point came in the year 553 after Christ, at the Second Council of Constantinople, convened by Roman Emperor Justinian I under the reign of Pope Vigilius. The doctrine of past lives and the reincarnation of the soul was officially labeled heresy. The reason behind this decision was entirely political and economic. The Roman Church at that time was in the process of expanding its power. It quickly realized that if people believed in reincarnation, meaning they believed they had many lifetimes to correct their mistakes and elevate their souls, the exclusive role of the Church would be severely weakened. The Church would no longer be the only keeper of the key leading to heaven. The concept of reincarnation would take away the greatest weapon of religious power, the fear of eternal judgment. Alongside this, the development of a system of bishops, priests, and massive parishes required an endless financial source. To seize control of property, the idea of priests living celibately was strengthened in order to ensure that property would not be passed down to children, but would instead belong to the Church. At the same time, The concept of an eternal hell and the Church's authority to ask God for the forgiveness of sins were pushed to their highest point. Without submission to the Church, the soul would burn forever. Every document and book that supported reincarnation suffered the same fate, ruthless destruction, just like much of the knowledge from the pre-Christian world. The rejection of reincarnation also played a vital role in the bloody crusades that came later. Tens of thousands of people donated all their possessions to the Church and took up swords to rush into battle in the name of God. Those warriors were willing to die because they had been filled with the belief that martyrdom was the only and fastest ticket straight to heaven. If they had believed that they would reincarnate back to Earth, carrying the heavy karmic burden of killing, would they still have eagerly thrown themselves into those wars in the name of religion? The law of cause and effect and reincarnation. Karma and samsara is a system of absolute justice. If you commit evil, you must pay for it yourself. You cannot bribe a priest or buy an indulgence to erase your karmic burden. Because of this impartial justice, it became the greatest enemy of the Inquisition. When religious organizations tortured and burned tens of thousands of people alive in the name of God under accusations of witchcraft, communities remained silent in terror because they believed the Church was always right. If ordinary people had understood the law of cause and effect, they would have realized that no God permits human beings to kill in His name, and the power of the Inquisition would have collapsed. Today, as human thought becomes more open, some liberal organizations within Christianity, such as those in the United States, have begun to take a more tolerant view of the possibility that reincarnation may exist. However, at the level of central doctrine, the Catholic Church still never acknowledges it. This rejection is understandable. Accepting reincarnation would not destroy faith in Jesus, but it would destroy thousands of years of doctrinal structure and power that human beings have added on their own authority. It would return Christianity to its most original and purest form, a place where human beings do not live in fear of an eternal hell, but take responsibility for every action through many lifetimes, and where the love of God is expressed through the fact that He gives us countless chances to return, correct our mistakes, and continue until the soul truly reaches perfection. The mystery of the shattering of the vessels, Shevirat HaKelim. Why do we always feel broken? We have spoken a great deal about tikkun, the mission of repairing the world and correcting mistakes from countless ages. But one deeply painful question will certainly rise in your mind. If the Creator is all-powerful and perfect, why did He create a world full of cracks from the very beginning? Why did He not create a flawless reality where human beings would never have to endure wounds? The Zohar answers this question through one of the most beautiful and tragic metaphors in human philosophy. Shevirat HaKelim, the shattering of the vessels. Imagine trying to pour the entire water of a surging ocean into one fragile glass cup. What would happen? The cup could not withstand that enormous pressure. It would burst apart. According to Kabbalah, the process of creating the universe unfolded in exactly the same way. In the beginning, the Creator desired to pour the light of His infinite love and wisdom into the universe, so that the material world could receive this vast energy. He created vessels known as kelim. But that divine light was too radiant, too immense, and too intense, while the vessels were too rigid and too immature. They could not contain that energy. And then a cosmic event occurred. The vessels shattered. Trillions upon trillions of fragments from those vessels scattered into the lower layers of space, falling directly into the material world in which we live. But the miraculous thing is, this attached to those broken fragments were the divine sparks of the Creator, the sparks of light. They were like glowing embers, still faintly burning, buried beneath a cold layer of ash. Those broken fragments carrying sparks fell into trees, rivers, soil, And most importantly, they fell into the soul of every human being. This is the key that unlocks the invisible pain you have always hidden, those nameless sorrows you do not know how to tell anyone about, because sometimes even you cannot fully understand yourself. Try to remember those moments when you sat quietly in the middle of a noisy party. All around you were the sounds of glasses clinking, friends laughing and talking. Yet from deep inside your chest, you felt unbearably alone, as though you were only a stranger forcing yourself to act out a role. Or those late nights driving home, when you reviewed the things you had spent your youth trading away. You had a stable job, a safe savings account, a family that looked peaceful, the things people often call a fulfilled life. But when the bedroom door closed and you faced the darkness, you still felt as though there were a gaping hole in your heart, a strange emptiness that no luxury item or praise could ever fill. There are even moments when you look up at the night sky, release a weary sigh, and vaguely realize, it feels as if I do not belong here. Modern society and medicine are often very quick to place countless labels on those feelings. You may have hidden depression. You may be falling into a midlife crisis, or you may be suffering from an anxiety disorder. And then we become afraid. We rush to treat ourselves by chewing on sedatives, throwing ourselves into self-development courses, or drowning in alcohol and frantic shopping sprees just to cover the wound that is still wide open. But the Zohar gently places a hand on your shoulder and says, wait, do not judge yourself so cruelly. This is not necessarily a disease. The aching emptiness tormenting you is actually the homesickness of the sparks of light dwelling inside you. That feeling of emptiness, restlessness, and alienation is the cry for help from the divine light imprisoned inside the barren fragments of the earthly ego. That spark carries the memory of eternity, of absolute perfection before the breaking occurred. It remembers its source. It knows it does not belong to this pile of ashes, and it keeps trembling with the longing to return home. Every time you feel broken, every time you feel not good enough, not perfect enough, the Zohar gives you a comfort with endless healing power. You have not failed. Your brokenness is not your fault. You were born as a fragment because you are living in a universe that has been broken since the dawn of time. The cracks in your soul are not shameful defects that must be hidden. They are the default condition of this world. The poet Leonard Cohen once wrote a famous line that carries the spirit of Kabbalah. There is a crack in everything. That is how the light gets in. If the vessels had not shattered, the material world would not exist, and you would never have the chance to use your free will to do one great thing: gather the sparks. Your mission in this life is not to strain yourself trying to become a flawless, unblemished statue. Your mission is to become a patient craftsman, slowly piecing together the fragments of your own self. Every time you overcome selfishness to help a stranger, every time you choose forgiveness instead of holding on to hatred, every time you dare to look directly at the wounds of the past and hold the child within yourself, that is one time you have lifted a spark out of the shell of darkness and repaired one crack in the cosmic vessel. And if we are honest, sometimes that becomes a reasonable excuse to avoid doing the difficult thing. In other words, it is not necessarily perfectionism, but only self-indulgence wearing a disguise. Perfectionism is a common temptation all of us must face in the battle against sin. And the good news is that God wants us to live in freedom, free from its rule in our lives. You must be perfect. But to understand and believe this, we must first understand something Jesus said that may sound contradictory, as quoted in the book of Matthew chapter 5, verse 48. Therefore you shall be perfect, just as your Father in heaven is perfect. This certainly sounds like a demand for literal perfection. And in one sense it is, yet in another sense it is not. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus affirmed that fallen humanity cannot reach this standard, not being angry, not lusting, not divorcing wrongly, not swearing falsely, not taking revenge, and also loving our enemies. But right before he came to the perfection part of his sermon, Jesus gave us a clue as quoted in the book of Matthew chapter 5 verse 17. "Do not think that I came to abolish the law or the prophets. I did not come to abolish but to fulfill." Jesus came to fully complete perfection on our behalf, according to the command of God. That is why the New Testament writers say things like this, as quoted in the book of Hebrews chapter 10 verse 14. "For by one offering he has perfected forever those who are being sanctified." This is the key to understanding what Jesus meant, and the key to being set free from the control of perfectionism. Because Jesus lived perfectly, died, and rose again for us, he purchased perfection for us. And God the Father, though he knows all the sins that still remain, still sees us as righteous in Christ. In the eyes of God, we are made perfect by faith in Jesus, freeing us from the need to gain approval from God or from anyone else through perfection. We are free to connect imperfectly in the holy battle against sin. The imperfect saints in the Bible. Nowhere does the Bible encourage us to pursue perfectionism. But the Bible does promise perfection. Perfection already purchased now, as quoted in the book of 2 Corinthians chapter 5 verse 21. And future perfection, as quoted in the book of Revelation chapter 21 verses 3 through 4. As a free gift of God's grace, so that we may be freed from perfectionism. That is why God shows us the weaknesses of the heroes of faith in the Bible. Abraham, a great example of faith, has the episode involving Hagar. Moses, the great prophet of God, at one point disobeyed the Lord at the rock. Aaron, the high priest of God, is connected with the incident of the golden calf. David, the special king of the Lord, had an immoral relationship with Bathsheba. Peter, the wonderful apostle of Christ, revealed his flaws in the Gospels, and later, as well as quoted in the book of Galatians, chapter 2, verses 11 through 14. The book of Acts and the epistles give us a broad view of the imperfect lives of the first Christians. God knows our temptations and tendencies toward perfectionism. And so he fills the Bible with stories of his wonderful grace and patience toward sinners. People who continue to fight sin imperfectly and stumble throughout their earthly lives. He wants us to know that perfection in action, as well as perfection in motive, lies completely outside our present experience. Living free from perfectionism, God has something better for us to strive for than the fantasy of our own perfection, which in the end will only turn us into slaves. Perfectionism may sound noble, but its great danger is self-orientation. Once it is driven by pride or fear in order to gain approval, it actually becomes focused on the self, not on God or anyone else. In other words, perfectionism, even in the battle against sin, is not driven by love or faith. And as quoted in the book of Romans chapter 14 verse 23, "Whatever is not from faith is sin." But God wants us to be free from the control of pride and fear. He wants us to live freely in the knowledge that he covers all our issues of perfection in the past, present, and future. In the ongoing battle against sin, God is not looking for perfect outward performance or perfect inward motive. He is looking for love and faith. You are free to fight imperfectly. God is calling us into the wonderful new experience of taking our attention off ourselves and how we are trying to meet expectations, and instead, as quoted in the book of Hebrews, chapter 12, verse 2, to fix our eyes on Jesus. He wants us to stop pursuing perfectionism or being paralyzed by it, so that we may be free to pursue love, as quoted in the book of 1 Corinthians, chapter 14, verse 1, and the book of 1 Timothy, chapter 1, verse 5, and to pursue wholehearted trust in the Lord, as quoted in the book of Proverbs, chapter 3, verse 5. And if perfectionism has a strong grip on us, God in his mercy may create circumstances that defeat our best efforts to succeed in the fight against sin, until we understand where our freedom truly comes from. In Christ you are free. You are free to follow Jesus even imperfectly. You have the freedom to fight in faith even with your flaws. because that is the only way you will fight for faith. As quoted in the book of Hebrews chapter 12 verse 1, perfectionism is a weight we must lay aside in the race of faith. God does not want us to focus on performing perfectly. Rather, as quoted in the book of Galatians chapter 5 verse 6, He wants us to focus on living with a childlike dependent faith expressed through acts of love. Once you have released the burden of perfectionism and accepted that stumbling is inevitable, a very practical question will surely rise in your mind. So in the end, how are we supposed to live the remaining days of our lives with all of these theories? The answer is not complicated or distant at all. It lies in the way we bring all of these principles back down into the most concrete actions of everyday life. The journey of healing in an imperfect reality. Have you ever wondered why following God can sometimes be so difficult? Is God Himself the one who is perfect in all things, the difficult part? Or is it we fallen human beings who make the pursuit of perfection so difficult? The truth is that we cannot follow God without His divine help. I have a few thoughts about how to address this difficulty and how we can find help from God to heal us so that we may truly become disciples and follow Him without allowing sicknesses to block the kingdom of heaven. A wonderful exercise is to think about all the people in the Gospels who were called to follow Jesus in some way, yet were hindered by sickness, disability, or even death. We see many kinds of illness affecting people in the Gospels. Yet Jesus heals all of them. For those who have faith, either their own faith, for example, the woman with the flow of blood in Mark chapter 5, verse 34, or the faith of others interceding for them, for example, the paralytic in Mark chapter 2, verse 5. There are very real connections between the illnesses, disabilities, demonic possessions, and deaths that Jesus healed, and the spiritual diseases that are currently preventing many people from following Jesus and entering the kingdom of God. I want to make it clear that in the literal sense, Jesus truly healed the people in the Gospels from real diseases. He truly cast out demons, and He truly raised the dead. But Scripture also has allegorical and moral meanings. See the Catechism of the Catholic Church, number 117. Those who are healed also represent people in our society today who are suffering from spiritual diseases, diseases that are just as real as physical sickness, but less visible to the naked eye. Physical illness will not prevent anyone from being united with Jesus in eternity. But spiritual illness can and truly does lead to spiritual death and eternal separation. Could each illness and disease that Jesus healed in the Gospels point to some kind of spiritual obstacle that it represents? It is astonishing how much benefit this meditative exercise can bring. For example, think about the blind and the deaf whom Jesus healed, and consider what a corresponding spiritual example might look like in the modern world. What is even more helpful is realizing that those who suffered from different illnesses in the Bible did not cause those conditions for themselves. While in many spiritual diseases, such as spiritual blindness, we often bring that condition upon ourselves through the attitude of our own hearts. Jesus is the solution to every sickness that prevents a person from entering the kingdom of God. If we can understand these spiritual obstacles and know that Jesus heals them, we can better open our hearts to the great healer, allowing Him to mend our brokenness so that we may draw closer to Him and be sanctified on the journey with Him. Here I want to begin by looking at spiritual blindness and the healing of Jesus. We see many spiritually blind people in the Gospels, blind to the truth. Spiritually blind people hear the truth, but they cannot understand its meaning. They cannot see the big picture of salvation, and they cannot see how it applies to their own lives. They struggle to confess the truth because they find it hard to believe what they cannot see. They are always afraid of being attacked because they live in darkness. And naturally, anyone living in darkness is at serious risk of being fiercely attacked by the unknown. The fear present in those who are spiritually blind sometimes leads to a rebellious reaction when they are exposed to the bright, penetrating light of truth. They cannot see the light of truth, although it enters their eyes and reaches all the way into their souls. Their hearts have become hardened and may even become harder under its heat and light. As St. Paul describes it, they are darkened in their understanding, alienated from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them, because of the hardness of their hearts. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 18. Modern atheism is evidence of this, as it has shifted from passive unbelief into extreme aggressive action, treating anything and anyone that claims to have faith as a threat and attacking them. Nearly 50% of the people murdered since recorded history began were murdered in the last 120 years in the name of atheism, namely under communist and Nazi regimes, not counting the millions of abortions that have taken place because of atheistic policies. Just how many people has religion killed? Kirk Durston, National Director, New Scholar Society. Those who stubbornly reject the truth, those who claim there is no truth in things they cannot see, can become troublesome and burdensome to the people around them. The temptation can be very strong to cut off all relationship with them and leave them immersed in darkness, or even to retaliate with similar malice. In Leviticus chapter 19, verse 14, the Israelites were specifically instructed not to place a stumbling block before the blind, but to fear God. To fear God means to have reverence and respect for God, including faithfulness to His commandments. We can regard this as instruction on how we must respond to those who are spiritually blind, not with aggression or hatred, but with love, loving them as Christ loved us, even in the face of great difficulty or chaos. How should we deal with those who reject the truth because they cannot see it? In Isaiah chapter 42, verse 6, the Lord reminds us that we are called in righteousness to become a light to the nations, to open the eyes of the blind, to bring prisoners out of the dungeon, and those who sit in darkness out of prison. It is through faithfulness to the Lord and His word that we become light for the blind. We cannot force them to see, but we rely on God to make us shine, helping bring clarity to them. In the Gospels, we see that Jesus gives special attention to healing the blind. Indeed, Jesus heals more blind people than people with any other sickness. We learn that spiritual blindness comes from hardness of heart. This was the central problem of the Pharisees, as demonstrated in Matthew chapter 23. They could not see the truth, even though He was standing right in front of them. Blindness seems in John chapter 9, verse 32 to have been one of the hardest diseases to heal, because no one had ever been seen with it since the beginning of the world. Spiritual blindness is just as difficult to heal, because it depends on a change of heart, a softening of the heart, something that can only happen through the miraculous intervention of God. Matthew chapter 13, verse 15. For this people's heart has grown dull, and with their ears they can barely hear, and their eyes they have closed, lest they should see with their eyes, hear with their ears, understand with their heart, and turn to me so that I may heal them. Thanks be to God, for He specializes in healing souls and opening the eyes of those who are spiritually blind. Let us pray that the Lord will grant us a heart of understanding, so that we may bring healing and the complete beauty of the sight that Christ has given us. And from this moment, your journey of healing begin. In the words of Acts chapter 1, verse 8, there is a mission called the Great Commission of Jesus, bringing purpose and direction to all who believe in and follow Jesus. Considering the value that followers of God receive when they know Him, what could be more important than helping others know Him? Is there anything more wonderful than introducing someone to God, bringing that person into a relationship with Him and into true, eternal life? What about you? Consider the Bible for a moment. Perhaps someone gave you a copy, or perhaps you bought a Bible to satisfy your spiritual curiosity. Either way, those who valued the message of Jesus passed it on to you in the form of this written text. And before that, someone else explained their story to them. And going further back, there were people who had been taught by followers of Jesus. An unbroken line of people passing forward the truth of Jesus reaches all the way back to Jesus, standing with his disciples on that hillside 2,000 years ago, and it ends right here in this moment as you are reading these words. If you accept the message of the Bible as truth, you can trust you will begin an extraordinary adventure. You will fulfill the main purpose of your life by experiencing everything Jesus has in mind for you, especially by sharing that reality with others. You will become part of a continuous company of believers, people who are serious about carrying the message of their reigning Lord to the ends of the earth. And what about the Zohar? In the Zohar, the way to heal imperfections does not lie in trying to hide or deny them. The Zohar teaches that imperfection is not a stain that should make you feel ashamed or punish yourself. In essence, within the Kabbalistic tradition, the process of healing, also called tikkun, works through a very practical and sometimes deeply challenging mechanism. The universe will continually place you in the exact circumstances that reveal your weakness most clearly until you act differently on your own. If your imperfection is cowardice, you will repeatedly be pushed into situations that force you to speak up in defense of the truth. If your weakness is anger, and the desire to control you, will always have to work with partners or raise children who constantly test your patience. The Zohar explains that a soul is never healed simply by sitting with closed eyes and telling itself that it has become better. It is truly mended only when you stand right in the middle of chaos, face the familiar trap that has made you stumble countless times in the past. And at that decisive moment, use your will to choose a completely new response. Instead of reacting impulsively with anger as usual, this time you choose to take a deep breath and practice patience. Instead of avoiding responsibility and blaming the situation, this time you step forward and accept your part of the blame. Instead of lying to gain a short-term benefit this time, you accept a loss in order to preserve your integrity. The very moment you break that old habit of reaction is the moment healing takes place. The old mistake is cut off and your soul is truly reshaped. The Zohar also emphasizes a truth that can set the human mind free. Perfection is a dead concept. The fact that you have hidden corners, past mistakes, or bad traits you are working to repair every day does not mean you are a failure or a defective product. The process in which you become aware of your wrongs, feel the sting of conscience, and make an effort to adjust your behavior through ordinary daily encounters is the true core of life. Many people think healing must involve a miracle or some kind of course that can whiten every wound and erase every bad trait overnight. But reality is not like that at all. Healing happens in a much quieter and more practical way. It lives in the smallest ordinary moments. It happens when you realize you are about to lose your temper in a tense meeting and you choose to breathe and stop yourself. It happens when you are about to say something cruel to a family member during an argument, but you decide to swallow your anger so you do not wound them. Do not pressure yourself into thinking you must become a flawless person who is never allowed to make a mistake again. That is unrealistic for a human being. You only need to set one truly practical goal. You will still stumble at times. You will still do wrong at times. But today, the amount of time it takes you to courageously admit your mistake and correct it has become shorter than it was yesterday. That alone means you have already succeeded in healing yourself. We have walked through a very long journey together. From worlds that were broken apart before Genesis even began, to the secrets of reincarnation that religious powers deliberately buried for centuries. We have uncovered the true face of supernatural beings, only to realize that angels and demons are not merely figures flying through the sky or hiding beneath the earth. They are present in the struggling tendencies inside every human mind. The greatest secret the Zohar has preserved after 2,000 years is not a form of magic that lets you see through the worlds of the living and the dead, nor a way to escape judgment. Its greatest secret is that it shows you this. The real cosmic battle is taking place right inside your living room, at your desk, and in the most private decisions you make when you are alone with your conscience. It is time to lay down the burden of perfection. Like the vessels that were shattered in the earliest dawn of existence, your imperfection was something the universe had already accounted for. The cracks in your soul and the mistakes of your past do not define you as a failure. They are the map showing you what needs to be healed in this lifetime. You are not here to become a smooth, flawless statue. You are here to become a patient worker, gathering the buried sparks of light from the ruins within yourself. Today, you have tried enough. However many unfinished things this day may have left behind, however many wrong decisions or words that still trouble your conscience, allow yourself right now to set them all down. The journey of reincarnation and the repair of the soul is a very long road, and you are not required to resolve every fracture in your life in a single night. Slowly close your eyes. Relax the shoulders that have been carrying too much pressure from expectation. Allow yourself to rest, and most importantly, forgive yourself for your own imperfections. Tomorrow, when the light returns, we will continue the work of stitching this world back together, simply by becoming someone who can admit mistakes and correct them faster than yesterday. Thank you for being here, for walking with these ancient mysteries all the way to the final moments. I wish you a deep, quiet, and peaceful sleep.